She got me good. She had clearly been planning this for a while and had gathered a lot of advice. I honestly never saw it coming. Her timing was perfect. I had just finished 20 years at my job and received a bonus equal to a month's pay, along with my regular paycheck for 2 weeks. The next day, she emptied our accounts, had me served with papers, claimed I was abusive, and got a restraining order against me. She even had her new partner move in the very next day. To add to the awkwardness, he was a supervisor in a different department at my workplace. He smirked at me the next day, and it took 3 people to help me keep my cool. It wasn't love at first sight with Kim. She was someone who had always been told she was pretty and had started to believe it too much. She was often arrogant and had some strong opinions about others. We grew up in a town outside Raleigh, North Carolina, and while she wanted a good life, she didn't have a clear plan to get there. I met her at our company picnic. My boss was a bit quirky and invited many of his business contacts just to say thank you. His picnics were known for great food and fun prizes, and many people showed up. Kim worked for his accounting firm as a secretary and had gotten the job through a favor from her father. She even had to take some courses at the community college before she could get a permanent position. She wasn't happy with how things were going and expected more. Everyone enjoyed the food, mingled, and waited for the prizes. Some were donated by vendors, but my boss had bought extra prizes to ensure that everyone left with something. The top 4 prizes were a stainless steel wine cooler, a nice gas grill, a day at a full-service spa for 2, and $1,000 in cash. People grumbled about their smaller prizes while their friends laughed. As the prizes got bigger, the mood turned more serious. In the end, it was down to me, Kim, a wonderful girl named Sophie, and a guy from our legal team. The lawyer won the spa trip and Kim got the gas grill. She really wanted the wine cooler and was complaining loudly. It was clear she'd made several trips to the free bar. Sophie ended up with the wine cooler, which meant I won the $1,000 prize. As I went to collect my envelope, I could hear Kim. "What's a—" she began before her friend stepped on her foot. "That hurt. But seriously, does she look like someone who drinks wine?" Kim continued, not realizing others were watching. Everyone was staring, and Sophie looked embarrassed. I knew her. She lived with her mom and had 2 small kids to care for. Money was tight for her. I walked up and gave her a warm hug. "Congratulations, Sophie. If you ever want to sell it, I will give you $500 for it." She smiled right away, took my hand and shook it. "Deal?" I handed her 5 of the $100 bills. Then I turned to the lawyer and offered him $200 for the spa trip. He laughed. "My wife already goes there regularly, so it wouldn't be exciting for her. It is a nice place, but I think she would prefer the money instead." His wife stood next to him. Her prize had been a set of golf balls. "Deal," she said. "I will donate this money in his name to the Literacy Council we support. I will even give you the golf balls as a thank you, but honestly, you don't seem like someone who enjoys spas." "Oh, I'm not, but I have a friend who could use a little treat." I turned and handed the certificate to Sophie. "Here, you deserve this. Take your mom. I'm sure she'd love it. I can even watch your kids if you need." Sophie was in tears, and both she and her mom hugged me warmly. I glanced over at Kim. "Miss Morris, do you still want the cooler? I don't need it. I have a bigger one at home. If you want to swap, I don't have a gas grill." She looked at me closely. "You have surprised me, sir, which is not easy to do. I will accept your kind offer if you invite me over for a meal. I will even bring the wine." She seemed genuine, so I agreed. She also congratulated Sophie, wishing her an enjoyable trip to the spa. She came over, and after we had a nice meal, she praised my cooking. We drank 1 bottle of the wine she brought. I showed her my collection, and she was impressed by how many I had. I got into wine when I lived in Europe. I spent time in France, Germany, Portugal, and Italy visiting different wine regions. Some of these bottles are from vineyards I've actually been to. How long did you live abroad? What part were you in? I've never left the country. I'm so envious. I loved living there and had many happy memories, though some were not so great. I lived in Scotland and England for 3.5 years while serving. I tried to travel as much as I could during my time off. I didn't go into details, and she changed the topic. I enjoyed our time together enough that I asked her out. She agreed, and the rest, as they say, became history. We got married. I brought up the idea of having children, but she said she couldn't have any. I focused on treating her well. The downside of treating someone too well is that they can become spoiled. This thought hit me while I read the divorce papers. I was in shock and not making wise choices. Things got worse. All 3 of our vehicles were in her name because I was always working and she handled the paperwork. She threatened to have me arrested if I didn't give my truck to her. She was really pushing for me to sign some papers. She said she would make sure I was treated fairly and that I would get a good deal if I let the divorce go through her way. I eventually got enough strength to hire a lawyer, thanks to a good friend who was much older and helped me out of my sadness. Get it together, man. She really did a number on you. Now, are you going to give up easily, or are you going to remember you have some strength? I was starting to come out of my shock. I had loved her deeply before everything happened. Now, I just wanted to move on. I told my friend how I felt. Good, he said, giving me a business card. 3 o'clock Monday, don't be late. I looked at the card. It was for a well-known divorce law firm. Maggie McGill, the lawyer I would be meeting, had a reputation for being tough. I arrived on time and was taken into a stylish office that showed simple elegance. It looked like success with taste. She was different from what I imagined. A third-generation lawyer, the granddaughter of one of the founders, she was 29, tall and slender, with blue eyes and red hair. Nice to meet you, Mr. McLaugh. I wish it were under better circumstances. Uncle Will has spoken highly of you, and he doesn't do that often. That explained how I ended up here. She asked me to share my story so we could plan our next steps. It was unexpected. We weren't fighting and had a good social life. We didn't have kids, which I guess is a good thing now. We were close and shared our lives. She was never rude or unkind. We argued only a little, nothing serious. 5 years together, and now it's all fallen apart. She looked thoughtful. Your wife must have been very convincing. When did she have time for someone else? I see your job doesn't involve business trips. Does she work too? Yes, she is a secretary at an accounting firm. She's been there for years. We needed both incomes to afford our house. I have long shifts, so she's alone for a few hours in the afternoons. I also run a small business on Fridays, but I'm home by 5. She has a girls' night out on Thursdays and usually comes back by 10. I'm in a bowling league on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I'm usually back by 9:30. It doesn't leave much time for anything else, especially since our other person works a regular job. She sighed. You might be surprised. Sadly, I've seen many situations like this. If they want to, spouses can find a way. If you don't suspect anything, they can almost do it right in front of you without you noticing. I noticed a large ring on her finger. She saw me looking and smiled. Yes, I'm married. 4 years now. My last name is Stewart. I just used my maiden name in court because of the family connection. Believe it or not, he also knows a lot about family law. He believes strongly in finding peaceful solutions while I enjoy the excitement of court cases. Between the two of us, we've dealt with many situations, so we know the challenges that can come up. Plus, we have a strong prenuptial agreement, which makes getting a divorce very costly and awkward if you're the one who strayed, and we keep our work separate from our personal lives. What do you want now? Is there any love left? I took a deep breath. None. I've moved past the shock and sadness, and I'm mostly done feeling angry. Now, I just want to end things and move on. I want my fair share of what we've built together. I don't want the house, but I want my part of its value. I also want my share of the cars, even though I don't want any of them. Everything else I can manage without. For 90 minutes, we talked about my finances and options and made a plan. I felt much better when we finished. Okay, we'll respond with the reason of unfaithfulness. It probably won't have too much impact in the courtroom, but some judges do take it into account. You could also sue for interference in your relationship, but you probably won't win anything. Still, it could cause him some trouble in terms of legal fees and embarrassment. We can use that as a negotiating tool. She has no real evidence of wrongdoing, so we can get the restraining order dropped. Do you need to grab anything valuable from the house now? This was really on my mind. Yes. I need some clothes, and I want to get my tools and, most importantly, my musical instruments. She looked at me with a grin. Musical gear. What do you have? I smiled back. My guitars, my tin whistles and flute, my accordions, and my bagpipes. Bagpipes? Yes, I play bagpipes. Call me McLaugh, I joked in a playful accent. She chuckled. Part of my payment will be you playing for me one day. I'll start the paperwork and make sure you can get into the house by tomorrow. Does that sound good? For the first time, I felt hopeful about my situation. That would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Now who do I give this money to? I had a check for $2,500 to hand over. She looked a bit surprised. Can you really afford this? I know she has taken most of your money. I smiled. She wasn't as smart as she thought. Remember that hobby I mentioned? I carve wood. Not like a professional, but I make fun things. I get leftover wood from a furniture place and some pieces from a local factory. Plus, your uncle lets me gather wood from his land. I have 2 shops in the mountains that sell my items on consignment. I've saved that money in a separate account. Almost $10,000 so far. I was going to use it to take her on a lovely trip for our anniversary, but that's not happening now. Okay, I'll accept it, but since she started this whole issue, I'll do my best to have her cover our fees. If it works, we'll refund your money. I left feeling a lot better. My wife was in for a surprise. I met with Maggie, Kim's lawyer, and a deputy sheriff at 10 the next morning. Kim was there along with another man, and she looked very upset. She made it clear that he was there to protect her. The lawyers and the deputy just looked at each other, unsure. I found it amusing. As I packed my clothes, things got serious. The lock on my gun case was broken, and both handguns and 1 shotgun were missing. Kim, where are my guns? I asked. She smiled and said, Oops, we had a break-in a few days ago. They were stolen. Maggie and the deputy looked shocked. The deputy was angry. I don't think Kim's lawyer knew about it either. Did you report the theft? He asked. She looked at him. I hadn't gotten to it yet. His eyes narrowed. Is anything else missing? Just a few more things. My guitars and other instruments and some tools. I'll make a list and report it soon, I promise. Maggie was furious and turned to her lawyer. You need to have a serious talk with her. It would be best if those items were found quickly. Kim nearly lost it when she learned how valuable everything was. The guns cost around $2,000, the tools a few hundred, but the instruments were worth over $10,000. I had everything stored on my computer, including serial numbers for insurance. The deputy filled out a report and gave me a copy. I mentioned it would be interesting to see what our homeowner's insurance would say when I filed a claim. She had made a mistake by not cleaning off the computer and got upset when I took it. I pulled out the receipt from our file cabinet showing I had bought it, so she had no choice. I need to move some things to my laptop first, she said, sounding worried. I'll make sure everything is emailed to you, said Maggie with a friendly smile. It's personal. Then it shouldn't have been on his computer. If it makes you feel better, we can set it up at my office. Bring your laptop and we'll transfer what you need. Call me when you're ready. If the court decides it's shared property, you'll get half the value. We left, and I followed her to her office. Her lawyer stayed behind, saying he needed to talk to his client. Maggie was quite happy. I hope you didn't have anything too personal on your hard drive. I'm planning to have someone check it thoroughly. Well, it's just what you'd find on any regular guy's computer. I read some stories on a couple of sites. It's not what I thought it was until recently. Next, even though all the vehicles were in her name, the insurance was in mine. I canceled the insurance on the 2 that were paid for, but kept it on the one we still owed money on. I told the insurance company that she would be responsible for the bill when it came due in 2 months. I forgot to mention something important to her, and 2 weeks later, a state trooper came to take the tags away. Kim almost got in trouble when he told her it would cost $100 and she'd have to wait 2 months to get the tags back. I had bought a little Ford Ranger from Will. It was for sale before my problems began, and since he knew my situation, he gave me a great deal. The truck was nearly 20 years old, but still in pretty good shape. I actually enjoyed driving it. The only vehicle Kim could drive was the truck, but it had a manual transmission, and she didn't know how to drive it. I recorded her angry outburst on my phone, filled with yelling and cursing. Maggie had her experts look at the computer, and it revealed everything about Kim's situation. The emails unveiled her whole affair, and her lawyer tried to argue that we had invaded her privacy. But the computer was mine. Kim had sold my musical instruments online, but I got them all back in 3 months. The person who bought my items didn't want to return them, but he faced trouble if he didn't. I never got my other items returned, but she had to pay me what they were worth. My tools were found at a pawn shop a couple of towns away, and surprisingly, they were traced back to her lover's brother. That gave me some extra leverage. I could have pressed charges for theft and selling stolen items, but I decided not to in exchange for better terms in the divorce. In the end, Kim lost a lot. I didn't want the house, so she and her partner had to either buy me out or sell it. They couldn't afford to buy me out, so the house got listed for sale. She stayed there until it sold, not thinking it would happen anytime soon. But the real estate company sold it quickly for almost the asking price. Kim tried to delay but had to sign the paperwork. I chose one of the vehicles, taking her SUV and leaving her with the truck and the Mustang. Returning half the money she had taken from our accounts upset her. She also had to pay my attorney fees, which she complained about a lot. The easy lifestyle she and her partner had planned on living off me faded away, and they had to struggle to pay their bills. Was I happy? Not really. I felt relieved about the divorce, but I didn't want it to happen in the first place. Reading her emails, how she insulted me and looked down on me, was painful. I was just a guy from the countryside with no big dreams in her eyes. I still didn't understand what went wrong, and she made it clear she wouldn't explain. I stayed in a bad mood for months. I tried going out to bars and parties, but still felt down. While I was in my woodworking shop, an old garage I rented from Will, I was playing a sad tune on my pipes when my friend Tony dropped by. He stood behind me for a couple of minutes without me noticing. When I finally stopped playing, I let the air out of the pipe. "Wow, that was pretty gloomy. What was that?" he asked. I smiled. "A sad tune. It's fittingly named McClough Comes No More." He took out my Martin guitar and we played some lively tunes. When we finished, I couldn't help but smile. He smiled back. "You know what? I think it's time for Mad Tam to come back." Mad Tam was my stage persona from my band days with Tony and some friends years ago. I stopped playing when I got married after 6 mostly good years. That was a different time. I'm 40 now. I'd probably look silly. You're a well-preserved 40. You could still entertain a crowd if you wanted. I thought about it. He encouraged me. "Why not bring your gear to Dave's barn this Saturday? We're having a cookout and we could jam just for fun. What else do you have planned?" The simple answer was nothing, so on Saturday at 6, I found myself in their driveway. Dave was another old bandmate I hadn't seen in a while, but I heard he got married. Most of us were around 40 except for Dave's wife, a lively 34-year-old, and a young couple, her nephew and his wife. We enjoyed food, chatted, and had a few drinks before Dave led us into the barn. He had removed the stall walls, creating a spacious area complete with a little bandstand. It was a great time. Dave's nephew played drums, and his wife was an excellent fiddler and singer. We stuck to mostly traditional songs when, during a break, Robbie, the drummer, spoke up. "Can we play something that keeps me awake until the end?" I set down my pipes and picked up my accordion, whispering to Dave and Tony. I asked Molly, his wife with lovely red hair, if she knew a certain song. Her face lit up instantly. "Count it off, Robbie." We launched into Salty Dog by Flogging Molly. It was fast, loud, and a blast to play. We were a little rough at first, but by the 3rd time we played it, we were doing great. Then we transitioned to Waxy Dargle by the Young Dubliners. My tin whistle and her fiddle worked well together. Dave's wife, Amy, was a fantastic keyboard player, and after an hour it felt like we had been making music together forever. We kept going until after 1 in the morning. The older couples were smiling, but Robbie and Molly seemed to be on cloud 9. "We need to do this again," he said excitedly, as Molly laughed and danced around the room. I surprised her by getting up with my pipes and doing a bit of a dance, finishing with the hornpipe while she played. "Where did you learn that?" she asked when we finished. "From my grandfathers, Fergus and Ewan McClough, may they rest in peace. And from some friends I met during my service. What about you? Where did you learn to dance?" "My mom teaches. I'm first-generation Irish-American. She came from County Down when she was 17 and only returned for her honeymoon and her 20-year anniversary." It was late, and everyone felt a bit tipsy, so Dave offered us all a place to stay for the night. I set up my air mattress in the barn and surprisingly got a good night's sleep. Amy and Molly made us a big breakfast before we promised to return the next Friday. I was in a great mood all week. Many friends told me they were happy to see me back. I even saw Asshole twice and smiled at him both times. The news about what happened reached the owner of our company, and his chances for a promotion disappeared. Everyone knew he was in a tough spot. The owner liked me and didn't tolerate dishonesty, especially at work. Hearing that he was struggling to pay for a new house made me smile. I found a nice apartment in one of the duplexes owned by Uncle Will. With my newfound freedom, I had few bills and could work in my shop at night without feeling guilty. My creations were selling well, and the two shops kept encouraging me to create more. I did for a little while, but then I returned to a pace that felt right. It started to feel more like a job than a fun hobby. Friday nights at the barn happened every other week, and more people began showing up. One evening, they surprised me with a new tam. Molly had seen old pictures of me wearing one and ordered it for my 41st birthday. I had grown my hair longer than I had in years, and it looked nice with the tam. At least, that's what the girls said. It had been 8 months since Kim left, and I was surprised at how little I missed her now. I remembered her dishonesty well, but our married life felt distant and unclear. Maybe I hadn't loved her as deeply as I thought, or maybe her actions had destroyed that love completely. I had seen her once or twice, but it didn't bother me too much. As long as she stayed in her own world and left me alone, I was fine. Molly and Robbie knew the owners of a pub and dance hall named O'Doul's. They were thinking about bringing in some Celtic bands to attract more customers on Fridays and Saturdays. They invited them to the barn to listen to our music, and before the night ended, we committed to play there the following Saturday. We held a quick meeting. Dave, Tony, and I had been through this before, so we knew what to expect. For Molly, Robbie, and Amy, it was a new experience. "Okay," I said. "If we do this, let's do it well. It can be a lot of fun, but I want to be clear. The moment it feels like work, or if you're not enjoying it, we'll stop, at least for me. I've learned that life is too short to do things you don't enjoy. Agreed?" They all nodded. "Great. Let's decide what kind of band we want to be." I noticed some confusion among those who hadn't done this before. I explained. "Do we want to play only rock songs, or do we want to include some traditional music and acoustic sets? My suggestion is to do a bit of everything. It will give us a wider audience and more chances to perform. And we need to create a show. Anyone can just stand there and sing with an instrument. But if that's all they do, they might as well be a piece of furniture. They'll be forgotten as soon as the audience leaves. If we put on a show, add some laughs, and create a memorable moment, people will talk about it. Then the next time they go out and see us advertised in the paper or online, they will likely choose to see us. This will make the bar owners happy, leading to more bookings and more money for us." I paused. And having a name wouldn't hurt. This sparked a long discussion. We thought about Celtic and Gaelic names, but decided we needed something simpler and easy to remember. Robbie came up with the best name. In the late 90s, a British band called Chumbawamba released a hit song called Tub Thumping. I really liked the song and had played it for Robbie, who added it to his favorites after looking it up. "What about the Tub Thumpers? It sounds fun and a little old-fashioned at the same time. It's catchy and easy to recall." Everyone agreed it was great. We talked about a hook, and Tony and Dale suggested I wear one of my kilts. "It will be different, and it will grab attention," Molly laughed. "After all, what's more interesting than a man in a skirt playing music?" They all laughed, but they convinced me to go for it. Showtime. It was a new experience for 3 of us, and quite a while for the others. Before we went out, I held a pep talk. "I won't say not to be nervous, that's normal at first, but remember, we're being paid to be on that stage, so let's be professional and give it our best. Ready to entertain this crowd?" They were ready. We came out, all but me. They started playing, and I walked onto the stage dressed in my kilt, sash, white shirt, vest, knee socks, and a sporran. The only thing a bit different was my black boots. We performed a lively version of Scotland the Brave, probably the best-known bagpipe piece in the world. Within minutes, the audience was clapping and some were dancing. When we finished, some people just stared at me. I smiled at the crowd. "What? Is my shirt showing?" I joked, using my best accent. That got a big laugh. I set aside the pipes and grabbed my accordion. "Flogging Molly," I announced, and we jumped right into a fun version of Salty Dog. The crowd was really enjoying it, dancing and clapping along. We switched to a chorus song, Angel, with Molly and Amy harmonizing beautifully. I played my tin whistle to complement Molly's fiddle. The crowd was cheering. We played some lively jigs and reels, fast-paced and fun, before finishing with a slow ballad. We finished our set with All Around My Hat, an old song by Steeleye Span. The harmonies were tight, and the rock guitar sounded great. By the end, we were tired and sweaty, but it felt good to take a break. I was too energized to sit still, so I mingled with the audience. One girl, who had a few drinks, asked what people wear under a kilt. "Nothing," I replied, looking her in the eye. "That's where the phrase 'going commando' comes from." I left her surprised and her friends laughing as I jumped back on stage. We wrapped up our show with a Dropkick Murphys song, "Going Out in Style," which is about an Irish wake. We played it with energy, and soon the crowd joined in, singing along. After the performance, we got handshakes, hugs, pats on the back, and questions about our songs. I had talked to the band about being friendly and engaging with the audience. It was great for word-of-mouth promotion. The owners were thrilled. They booked us again for 2 weeks later and already had another band lined up for the next weekend. We kept rehearsing, adding new songs and polishing the old ones. We also included some fun bits in between and worked on a few acoustic pieces. The venue was full when we played again. The managers had shared pictures on their Facebook, and there were many comments from customers. We wanted to make sure we didn't let them down. I let my hair grow and started wearing a handlebar mustache, something I had always wanted to try. Like Molly, I have red hair. We were getting great responses every time we performed. One night, the entertainment editor of the local newspaper saw us, and they featured us the following week. The Tub Thumpers are an energetic group, blending bagpipes, accordions, rock guitars, Celtic fiddling, strong drums, lovely keyboard work, and a vibrant bass line into a lively show that is a lot of fun. Definitely worth seeing if you're out and about. They'll be at O'Doul's this Saturday and the Irish Rose Pub next Friday. If you're looking for a good time, check them out. We could have played several nights a week if we wanted to. We decided against it early on. Dave and Amy had 2 kids, and Tony was divorced with a daughter, and he made it clear that his weekends with her were very important, so we only played every other weekend, sometimes adding an extra Friday. We had been at it for about 5 months, improving and working together until we felt like a well-oiled machine, almost flawless. Tony and I were the only singles in the band, so we definitely got some attention. It was fun for a while, and we made sure to be careful and respectful. It was just a fun, no-strings-attached arrangement, which was fine by us, but we both realized it was a bit silly for people in their 40s to act like teenagers, so we both decided to take it easy. Molly and I grew close, and she came to see me as a second father, which was new for me. I was somewhat relieved that Kim and I hadn't had kids, considering how hard divorce can be on them. Yet, deep down, I wished I had the chance to be a dad. I tried to fill that gap with Molly. Our area was buzzing with street festivals, each town hosting them on different weekends to keep things lively without competing. We played at several of these events, both as a full band and in smaller acoustic groups. Our sound was a fresh change, and people seemed to enjoy it. We even got invited to perform at a couple of county fairs, playing for some large crowds. Amy and Molly discovered a website that sold custom-made kilts, and surprised us one night by showing up on stage wearing matching ones. These weren't the usual kilts. They were pink with little white poodles. Not wanting to be left out, Robbie ordered one in black with little skulls. Tony and Dave followed suit and got ones in camouflage. We knew we were gaining a following when fans started asking where we got our kilts, and showed up wearing them at our shows. One guy even created a website for our fans, calling it Clan McThumper. We had a few videos on YouTube, too, made professionally to help promote us. I arrived early for practice, playing around on one of my accordions to warm up. I had just watched Annie Get Your Gun the night before on TV as part of a marathon. My grandmother used to love those films. Without thinking, I began to play Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better. Unbeknownst to me, Molly came in and started playing along with her fiddle. I looked up, smiled, and began to sing the first line. To my surprise, she knew the words, and we ended up singing the whole song together. When we finished laughing, the rest of the band had come in and applauded us. We should include that in our set, maybe as a fun moment, Amy suggested with excitement. We all agreed and worked on it until we found a version that worked for us. The Starlight Room was a bit fancier than the places we usually played, but they wanted us and offered a bit more money. It attracted a more upscale crowd, people like lawyers, doctors, and those in higher management. The audience was a bit reserved during our first set, but they relaxed during the second. At the start of the third set, I went on stage alone with my accordion and began playing Anything You Can Do. Molly joined in and played along as though we were having a light-hearted debate while the rest of the band got ready. We became more animated until Amy called out, "Hey everyone, wait!" She paused, scanning the audience. "How about we let the crowd decide? I'll grab a microphone and walk around the room. We'll ask both guys and girls to share something their gender can do better than the other. The best answer will win a free round of drinks for their table. How does that sound to everyone?" The crowd got excited, laughing and cheering. We started playing music and paused when someone spoke up. The answers ranged from the usual to the unexpected. Guys mentioned fixing cars while the girls talked about household tasks. Most responses got a few boos. One guy, who was clearly an architect, shouted, "Design things." Then Molly surprised us all. Eileen Gray, Art Deco style. It seemed there were many architects in the bar because names started flying around fast. Kazuyo Sajima, At Man, Frank Lloyd Wright. It could have gone on, but we called it a tie and moved on. Another round called Keeping a Secret also ended in a tie. "Better cooks," a woman said. This time I jumped in. "Rick Bayless, Jacques Pepin, the Dean brothers?" I named a few more before running out. "Okay, maybe I watched too much PBS." Amy answered for the women. "Paula Deen. Who do you think taught those boys? Rachel Ray, Lydia Bastianic, Julia Child." Yet another tie. But the crowd was really enjoying themselves. "Let's do one more. I'll make it easy for the women. Name one thing that there's no doubt women can do better than men." There were some suggestions, but none stood out. A woman waved her hand, trying to catch our attention. I signaled to Amy to notice her. I had seen her before. It was hard not to notice someone so striking. She had long, black curly hair, light cream-colored skin, and a confident presence. She was with a group of women, probably enjoying ladies' night out. She stood up, looked right at me, and smiled warmly. "Fake an emotion," she said with a charming British accent. The crowd burst into laughter, and I felt a little flustered. "Men, we admit defeat," I said into the microphone. "Let's hear it for our winner." Amy jumped back on stage, and we played a lively set of upbeat tunes. We had played some classic Van Morrison songs. I didn't get to sing much because of my voice, but they let me sing during this one. I looked right at the woman who won as I sang Brown-Eyed Girl. She had a thoughtful look on her face, then a tiny smile. I think she liked it. After the show, I saw her chatting with Amy and Molly. Molly rode back with me from the club, grinning. "What's up?" I finally asked. "Somebody likes you?" she sang in a teasing tone, sounding almost like a playful child. I couldn't help but smile. "Who would be interested in an old bagpipe player like me?" She nudged my arm. "You're not old. And you're a handsome man. I've often thought your ex-wife made a mistake letting you go." I have to say I agree. Now, which older lady was interested in me? I couldn't hide my amusement. It had to be the older woman at the club, likely in her 50s. She looked good after some costly treatments, probably from an ex. She was definitely interested. I let her down gently and noticed her later, happily chatting with a much younger guy. Molly laughed. "Not her. This one is younger than you and very pretty. She asked a lot about you while we were packing, especially if you were seeing anyone. I happily told her you were single. I bet she will approach you tomorrow." "Did this lovely lady have a name? Will I know her?" "Based on how much you were looking at her tonight, I think you'll recognize her. She was the contest winner. Her name is Amanda Abbasi." My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "You're joking, right? She's way out of my league. I'd guess she's under 30. Molly giggled. "You're probably right. Still, it doesn't change her interest." She leaned back and quickly fell asleep. Molly sleeps deeply, and it took Robbie and me to help her out of the truck. He was smiling. "What do you think?" "About what?" "About Amanda. I think she might need glasses, or maybe she was just tipsy, or she could have a thing for redheads." He was enjoying this a little too much. "What I think is it's not nice to joke about something I could never have. Good night, Robbie." We played there again the next night, which was rare for us. I thought about it as I drifted off to sleep. True to what Molly said, Amanda returned the next night with just one friend. She smiled, chatted with us during breaks, and said how much she loved our music. The ice finally broke while we were doing our routine. Molly, Tony, and I were on stools with our instruments playing some soft songs when Molly began giggling unexpectedly. We stopped. "Is everything okay?" "No, keep going." 2 minutes later, she giggled again. "What is wrong with you?" She giggled again and pointed to Amanda and her friend. "They're trying to see under your kilt." I dropped my instrument, grabbed a microphone, and jumped off the stage. "Is that true, ladies? Trying to get a peek at a hard-working musician? How could you?" Her friend nearly hid under the table in embarrassment, while Amanda just smiled. I continued joking. "I have feelings too, you know. I'm not just here for show. Well, speak up and stop staring." Amanda smiled and called out so everyone could hear. "I admit it, I was looking. What do you have on under that kilt?" I played along, enjoying the moment. "So that's what this is about. You want to see what's underneath? How bold. Well, go ahead, take a good look." I turned away slightly, giving a little show. This is usually the part where they blush and get flustered. Instead, she reached over and lifted my kilt, revealing the black shorts I had worn for fun. I work out a lot, and I'm proud of how I look. Before I could react, she playfully tapped me. "Wow, nice and fit, just how I like it." The crowd erupted with laughter, and I played it up even more. I stood up and pretended to be scandalized. "I can't believe it. You've seen my shorts. Now we have to get married to save my honor. I'll need to see a lot more if we're going to talk marriage, and honestly, I think your honor is long gone." People laughed so hard they had tears in their eyes. I surprised her by jumping into her lap. "You charming person, give me a kiss." I was trying to be playful. Everyone was taken aback when she took my face in her hands and kissed me deeply. It was more than just a quick peck, and it lasted long enough to surprise us both. I quickly jumped off her lap and she laughed softly, patting my back as I hopped away. Back on stage, I shouted, "Everyone meet Miss Amanda Abbasi. Give her and her friend a big round of applause." She looked surprised that I knew her name, but waved when the light hit her. After we finished packing up, she came over, chatting with Molly and Amy. Her friend was missing. She smiled and flirted a little while Molly giggled. "Looks like I'm stuck here. Would my future husband mind giving me a ride home? We're not strangers anymore, right? Maybe we can stop for coffee first?" I could listen to her all night. Her voice reminded me of some sweet memories, as well as a few not-so-great ones. I hesitated, trying to say I'd love to grab coffee. Molly and Amy nudged me on. "Well, you should go then. We'll finish packing. Bye, Amanda." She took my hand and led me outside, giggling when she saw my little truck. "Oh, a bit country, are we?" I just smiled, dropping my accent. "Yes, I am." We stopped at a Denny's, one of the few places open at that hour. Amanda surprised me by ordering a full breakfast. I stuck to coffee while she shared her story between bites. Born in England to a British mother and a Kenyan father. She was white and he was mixed, which explained her unique look. She paused for a moment. "Does that bother you? The mixed heritage, I mean?" "Not at all. It gives you a very special appearance." "I like it." She blushed slightly before she continued. She grew up in Kenya, but when her parents separated at 12, she returned to London. After studying in Edinburgh, she came to the US for medical school at Duke University. She still needed a year and a half of training before she finished. She started university later than most and was 29. I had the feeling her family was well off. Young, beautiful, wealthy. A doctor, she seemed far beyond my reach. She asked how old I was, and I told her I was 41. She looked a bit surprised and guessed I was in my mid-30s. I shared that I was mostly raised by my grandparents after my parents passed away, that I had served in the military, and that I worked in a factory while also playing music and carving wood. She already knew I had been divorced. "Whose fault was it?" she asked with her usual straightforwardness. "I'm not really sure. She kicked me out, if that matters. She already had someone else lined up. She never showed any signs of being unhappy and didn't give us a chance to fix things. She won't talk about it, and I'm not interested in finding out anymore." It was almost 4 when I dropped her off at her apartment. She had roommates, so I stayed outside. She gave me several sweet kisses that fogged up the windows before she hopped out. "See you next week," she called as she hurried to her door. What? When? I didn't even get her number. Even with all the teasing I faced from the guys, I mostly forgot about it. I thought of her as just another wealthy girl trying something new. So I was surprised when she showed up at the barn the following Saturday while we were setting up our equipment. We were playing 2 weekends in a row, which was unusual for us. Tony's daughter was at band camp, so he could join us. With vacation time coming, everyone wanted to earn a little extra, so we decided to work. Our popularity was growing, and we were actually making more money from music than from our regular jobs. She sat at the band table, making it clear she was with me. A very drunk woman tried to flirt with me, and that did not sit well with her. She made it clear I wasn't interested. I noticed her strong reaction, keeping that in mind. I still couldn't understand why she was attracted to me. Afterward, I took her home, stopping for breakfast along the way. After some small talk, I finally asked the question that had been on my mind all night. "Amanda, what's going on here? You're young, obviously well off, and very beautiful. I'm just an average guy, 12 years older, working in a factory. I don't see this going anywhere." She sat up straight and smiled slightly, a hint of color in her cheeks. "I appreciate your honesty. I find you attractive for several reasons. Maybe I prefer older men. Maybe I like your calm nature. Most of the men I've dated are doctors or lawyers. Many of the guys I know think highly of themselves. They care more about how I look on their arm at social events than about what kind of mother I might be. They don't really want to get to know me. If it doesn't work out, then it's just how it is." Even though I didn't see a future together, I found her so charming that I agreed to go on a date the following Friday. Of course, my friends from the band had plenty to say, and Amy and Molly gave me their advice over and over. "Don't be late. Make sure your SUV is clean. Bring her flowers. Take her somewhere nice for dinner." Finally, I had to stop them. "Enough. Molly, I've been dating since before you were born, and Amy, you were in middle school back then. I think I can manage one evening with an interesting woman." That didn't cool them down. When Friday arrived, I had trimmed my hair, tidied my mustache, and dressed nicely. I had made a reservation at a fancy steakhouse. She wore a simple red dress that really suited her. She looked stunning. We complimented each other and headed off to dinner. I was surprised when she ordered a big steak along with a hefty baked potato. She finished everything on her plate and even ordered dessert with coffee. "How much do you weigh?" I asked without thinking. She blushed a little. "That's not a question you should ask, but I weigh around 115. Why do you ask?" "Where do you put it all?" She smiled. "I have a fast metabolism and I work out at the gym at least 4 times a week. How about you?" "Same here, though I don't get to the gym as often. I suppose age affects my metabolism." I shared her dessert, and after dinner I asked what she wanted to do next. "Do you dance?" "A bit," I replied, remembering my family. My grandmother had a dance studio, and my grandfathers taught me different styles. I've been dancing since I was 6. We went to a club she liked. I felt a bit out of place due to the age difference, but I'm proud to say that I didn't embarrass her. Once her friends saw my moves, I was on the dance floor for a whole hour. Amanda finally took my arm when a slow song played and we swayed out onto the floor. Her expression tightened a bit. "Remember me? I'm your date." "Sorry. I saw how you were dancing with others and I didn't want to hold you back." She flushed slightly. "That guy was rude. If you had stayed with me, he wouldn't have bothered us. No more dances with anyone else, okay?" I pulled her a little closer. "Okay, I agree." The guy who had been bothering her asked for a dance when we sat out for a moment. She turned him down, but he kept insisting. "She's with me," and she said no. "Please leave us alone," I said a bit more sternly than I intended. Maybe he didn't realize what he was doing after having a few drinks, or perhaps he just wasn't thinking clearly. "What? Are you going to stop me?" He leaned over the table, grinning. I stood tall, my height clearly more than his. It's hard to judge someone's height when they're sitting. "Maybe," I replied, and he pulled back a bit. Amanda stood up and took my arm. "Now, honey, you promised you wouldn't pick fights with every jerk who bothers me. The last one was in the hospital for days. You would have been in serious trouble if he hadn't thrown the first punch. Let's go dance." Before we left, she looked the guy over. "I suggest you leave. The whole club, not just our table. Next time, I won't hold him back." He hurried away. "Would you have hit him?" she asked as we danced closely. "I don't know, maybe. I can't stand rudeness. It's just how I was raised. And besides, he knew you were with me. Does it matter?" "Yes, it does. If you're violent or too jealous, we won't last." "I'm sorry." He was about to say something disrespectful about you, and I won't let anyone treat you that way. I admit I got a bit jealous, but I'm not a violent person. If you feel uncomfortable, I can take you home and leave you alone." She moved closer. "I trust you. Just keep the caveman in check, okay? I appreciate you wanting to defend me. But it's late, and I work tomorrow. Last dance?" Since it was the final dance, I enjoyed it, holding her close, even when I felt myself getting a bit excited. I tried to step back, but she giggled and held me tighter. We shared a warm moment before I walked her to her door. "Next week?" she asked, looking hopeful. "Sorry, love, we're working both nights." "Where? Should I ride with you or meet you there?" Her words made me feel happy. "Meet us at the barn at 5. We usually have an early dinner together before we pack up." I smiled all week. We talked every night, sometimes just for a minute, once for an hour and a half. I admit she made me feel something special. I didn't see a future yet, but I was glad to enjoy the moment. She was at the house when I arrived, helping with dinner. I had never seen anyone look so wonderful in an apron before. I snuck up behind her, spun her around, and she squealed, "Hey, you scared me!" She softened her words with a smile and gave me a sweet kiss. She served me dinner, insisting that a good African woman always took care of her man. I reminded her she was in America, and here we take care of each other as equals. "I'll remember that for next time," she replied with a grin. We played our gig to a warm and welcoming crowd. Our fame was growing. The next night, during our second set, she walked in. Kim, my ex. I wasn't sure who was more surprised. She was with some co-workers and 2 girls from my job. Thankfully, the guy who caused issues wasn't there. Tony caught my surprise and looked over. When he saw her, he shared it with everyone at our table. Amanda was very curious and even got up to take a better look. When she returned, she had a strange expression. I pulled her onto my lap and gave her a big kiss. "Showing off in front of the ex?" she teased. At first, she seemed a bit tense. "Absolutely. I want her to see you. You're younger, prettier, smarter, and a way better person than she could ever hope to be. Even if there's nothing special between us, I can't help but show you off. If it makes you uneasy, I'll stop," I said. She began to smile until I mentioned stopping. Then her expression turned serious, and she leaned in to kiss me back. "Okay, let's put on a show," she replied, her smile making me a bit anxious. We decided to change up the playlist for Kim. We started with the song we got our name from, Tub Thumping. Molly and I took the microphones and walked out into the crowd to sing along, the whole band joining in. "I get knocked down, but I get up again. Nobody's gonna keep me down." We sang right in front of her table, and the crowd joined in like they always did. Kim looked very uncomfortable. Amanda had vanished, but before I could think too much, she appeared next to me with a microphone. She wore a kilt in bright colors that really suited her. At the end of the song, she and Molly were leaning against me like they were part of me. The look on Kim's face was not pleasant. She left shortly after we finished. The girls were giggling. On the way back to the barn, she was quiet. After we packed up the equipment, I asked, "Breakfast? How about your apartment tomorrow morning?" "Sure, but I want to see what's really under that kilt. You show me yours and I'll show you mine," she said with a playful grin. I was caught off guard by her words. She laughed and took my hand. "That is, if you really want to," she added. I sped home, eager to get there quickly. She slowed me down with a gentle reminder. "Take it easy. We have all night and hopefully a long future ahead. We can get close later. Right now, I just want to be with you." So I did, tenderly showing her affection. I cherished every moment we shared as we found joy in each other's company. When I noticed something unexpected, she simply smiled and told me, "Commando." The morning sunlight streamed through the blinds, filling the room with a warm glow. I felt a deep sense of calm and contentment, realizing why as I noticed her by my side. She was nestled against me, her hair spilling over her face as she slept soundly. I gently brushed her hair aside, and she stirred, mumbling softly before curling closer. Eventually, I carefully slid out of bed, trying not to disturb her. I freshened up and started a warm shower, letting the water wake me fully. A few minutes later, she joined me, greeting the day with a relaxed smile. She sighed as the warm water cascaded, and we shared a quiet, joyful moment, helping each other wash off the sleepiness of the night. After we were both refreshed, we returned to the cozy comfort of the bed, enjoying a peaceful morning. We spent the day close, enjoying each other's company and sharing easy, light-hearted moments, feeling grateful for the quiet happiness that wrapped around us. After a few more minutes of gentle movement, she slid off. I think she was surprised when I pulled her in for a long kiss. She fell back onto my chest with a soft sigh. She mumbled something quietly that I couldn't quite catch. "What did you say?" She smiled. "I'm sorry. It was something in Maasai. If we stay together, I'll tell you. For now, just be happy I said it, even if you don't know what it means." She wouldn't say anything more. Changing the subject, I pointed to the tattoo on her lower back. "It's a Maasai shield over crossed spears. It's similar to the design on our national flag. What about your tattoo?" She traced the outline on my arm. "When I know you better, I'll tell you. It has a special meaning for me." She smiled. "That sounds fair. How about this? When I explain what I said, you tell me about your tattoo. Deal?" "Deal." I kissed her to seal our agreement. We dated for another 3 months, growing closer every day. So it didn't surprise me when I got home to find a note on my door. "Needed to move something, love. Borrowed your truck. Be home by 7. She had keys to my apartment, which was unusual, but I didn't mind much until I remembered that she didn't drive. I soon got my answer when she arrived with Molly at the wheel. The truck was packed tight, as was Amy's minivan. The girls jumped out and started unloading. "What's going on?" I asked. Amy just grinned while Molly laughed. "She's moving in, silly. Why, I have no idea. Close your mouth and put those muscles to good use instead of just lifting weights. Oh, and she said your couch has to go. Can't blame her, that thing's pretty old." Amanda was hanging back, moving from one foot to the other, watching to see how I would react. I let her wait for a moment before I grinned. "I like that couch, but I don't love it. I love you, so I guess I can manage without it." It was the first time I had ever told her I loved her. She went pale for a moment, then jumped into my arms, wrapping her legs around me while trying to kiss me. Amy and Molly watched, smiling. "If I spray the hose on them, do you think we could get them apart? I need to get home. Robbie might try to cook dinner again, and that didn't go well last time." Amy laughed. "Help me unload the van. We can leave them to sort things out." We separated and helped, bringing everything inside. She told me she didn't have to work the next day, so she would organize everything then. I was glad. I didn't think she could fit all her clothes in our closet. She ordered pizza, opened a bottle of wine, and then we cuddled up together, hoping for a bright future ahead. We had been together for 4 months, quickly settling into a comfortable routine. Her work schedule changed a lot, so we made the most of the time we had together. She promised me that in just over a year, she would have a more regular schedule. "We need to find a bigger place, dear. This apartment isn't spacious enough." She was cuddled up next to me after a sweet moment together. She knew that if she wanted something, this was the best time to bring it up. "Bigger for what?" I asked casually, running my fingers through her hair. She moved my hand away gently. "Don't get sidetracked, children. This apartment isn't suitable for raising kids." I think I went blank for a moment. When I came back to reality, she was leaning on her elbows, her hair falling over my chest, looking at me with worry. Ewan, are you okay? I didn't mean to say that out loud. Please forget it." She seemed surprised when I held her close, feeling her tears on my cheek. When I calmed down, I kissed her deeply. "You're mistaken, my love. We will discuss this very soon. Just give me a moment to think, okay?" She nodded, relieved I wasn't upset, and snuggled back down. I took Amy and Molly with me, promising to quit the band if they told anyone. It took 4 jewelry stores before I found the perfect one. They were amazed by it. "It's beautiful," Molly said, admiring it on her finger. Amy couldn't wait for her turn, and I nearly didn't get it back. "It's so expensive," she exclaimed as I took it off her finger. "Can you afford it?" "I'm Scottish. We're careful with money. Yes, I can afford it." That Saturday, both of them were smiling at Manda. She noticed. "What?" she asked. "What are you two up to?" They played innocent. "Nothing, just excited for tonight." Luckily, she left it alone. I waited until the second set. I was playing a slow song on my accordion, alone. After a pause, I looked out at the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. Do you know what luck is? Perhaps providence would be a better way to put it. It's when you receive something you don't believe you deserve, yet it's yours anyway. When this happens, if you have any sense of honor, you cherish it. You keep it safe, reminding yourself that you don't deserve it, and it's your duty to prove you are worthy of it for the rest of your life. The bar became quiet. Even the heavy drinkers were paying attention. It felt like everyone sensed that something important was about to happen. I've faced some hardships in my life. I lost my parents when I was young. My grandparents, who raised me with love, also passed away. I served in the military and lost friends whom I grew to care for deeply. My marriage ended unexpectedly, at least for me. Then something happened that was so incredible I still find it hard to believe. Amy came up and helped me set the accordion aside, and Amanda was gently pushed onto the stage by the band. Her eyes widened as I introduced her. "This is Amanda Abbasi. This is the wonderful thing I'm talking about." For reasons I can't explain, she loves me. I got down on one knee and saw her usually warm skin become pale. And I love her more than I ever thought I could love anyone. "Amanda, will you marry me?" I held out the ring, and her eyes sparkled as she put it on her finger. She brought a microphone to her lips. "Yes," she whispered, and fell beside me. The crowd erupted in cheers. Some women, including Amanda and Molly, were in tears. The guys took their places and began to play music while we stayed on our knees, sharing a kiss. I think I took a break for about 3 songs before I felt ready to get back on stage. We had a video crew filming our performances for a new DVD, so we recorded the whole thing. I didn't know it, but they later posted it on YouTube as a teaser for a song. It got 300,000 views, which was amazing and helped the Tub Thumpers get noticed. One of her friends back in Cardiff saw it and told her mother. To put it lightly, we were not pleased. It led to a serious talk. "Amanda, what are you thinking, a Scotsman?" She laughed. "It's even worse, Mother. He's an American." Her mother was silent for a moment. "Really? Is he a doctor, too?" "No, Mom. He works in a factory." "A factory worker? I can't support this. Amanda, you need to come home and forget this silly idea." Amanda thought it was funny until that moment. "Mom," she replied firmly, "I am home. If you don't want to come to the wedding, that's fine. Maybe I'll send you pictures. Goodbye, Mother." You can't slam a cell phone, but she sure looked like she wanted to. I wrapped my arms around her. "Don't worry, I'm sure she'll come around. Want me to talk to her?" "No. Mom has always wanted me to marry someone important, like a knight or an earl." I smiled into her hair, glad she couldn't see my face. "Maybe you will someday." She giggled. "I did get a knight, Sir Ewan of North Carolina, who makes me feel like a queen. Her father came to visit. He was a short man, maybe 5'6" or 7. I always thought the Maasai were tall. Amanda was taller at 5'10", and when she wore her high heels, she was eye level with me. I liked that. I don't think her father liked me at first, but he didn't dislike me either. I soon understood where Amanda got her straightforwardness and sense of humor. "Are you going to be a good husband?" he asked suddenly. "I'll do my best." He tried to keep a serious face. "You better. I'm not returning the bride price." Amanda was watching us. In a traditional Maasai wedding, the groom has to give the bride's father a black bull and 2 black cows, as well as a ram and a ewe. The ram is prepared for the wedding feast, and the other animals are added to the family's livestock. Gifts of alcohol are also expected for the parents. I decided to send her mother 3 cases of scotch. Naturally, she didn't say anything in response. Amanda and her dad found it very funny. I looked into the prices of the best cattle and sheep, then gave him a check. He was taken aback by it, especially since I had taken the time to learn about their customs. This act was meant to be thoughtful. He ran a successful business and lived in a nice condo on the 10th floor. He then turned to his daughter and said, "I think it's time for you to finish your necklace." In their tradition, a bride weaves her own necklace using materials that are meaningful to her and her tribe. I learned that these necklaces are usually quite large. She smiled, a mix of shyness and pride. "I've been working on mine since our first date, Dad." I wasn't sure who was more surprised in that moment. After he left, she asked me what her father meant when he called me a senior warrior, which is the 3rd highest rank in Maasai culture, right after junior and senior elders. I promised her I would explain everything before the wedding. Honestly, I often wondered why she chose me. I spent many sleepless nights thinking she might realize she could do better. She was beautiful, young, and clearly smart. I had gone to a few hospital events with her, and even though I wasn't unattractive, I could sense the looks from her friends and co-workers sometimes. This made me want to improve myself. So I decided to talk to my boss. James was a good man. He had served 3 tours in Vietnam but was injured badly at the end of his last tour. He was a strong supporter of veterans and even encouraged me to join the National Guard when I was 18. His policies were very supportive. If someone had to leave for duty, they could come back with full seniority, and their time counted toward retirement. Many of his employees were veterans. "What can I do for you, son?" he asked. "You know I'm getting married, right?" "Of course. Anne and I were looking forward to sitting on the groom's side at the wedding." "You will be, but that's not why I came to talk to you. I'm not sure if you know, but she's a doctor and almost done with her residency. I realize I don't deserve her, so I want to prove myself worthy. If it's still an option, I'd like to join the management training program." He had been trying to get me into management for years, but I was not ready before now. He smiled. "Seems like you finally found someone who motivated you, huh? Good. Let me make a call." He contacted HR. "Julie, I need you to adjust Ewan's salary structure. Starting Monday, he will switch to a salary position as the management trainee in finishing. Mark can retire now, so I'll send him over to you soon to go over the perks and expectations. Start him at the highest level of the trainee scale, okay?" "Yes, I'll let him know." "Thanks." He looked at me and smiled at my reaction. "Well, go on then. She's waiting for you. Take tomorrow off and I'll make sure you get paid. It's a reward for making the right choice. Take your girl out and have a good time. Don't be late on Monday." I tried to thank him, but he waved me away, laughing. I took his advice and surprised Manda by picking her up and carrying her straight to the bedroom when I got home. After some time, when I thought I might never walk again, I asked her what she wanted to do because I planned to take her out. "Dance," she said excitedly. "You got it, dear," I replied, feeling a bit worn out. We enjoyed a shower together and she suggested, "We can go out or we can stay in and have fun. Your choice." With a cheeky smile, she said we should do both, starting with dancing. I had never felt so happy. We went to the club she liked, met some of her friends, and had a wonderful evening. While I was at the bar getting our drinks, I watched her dance elegantly with her friends when a man I didn't know came up next to me to order a drink. "You and Amanda are together, right? I'm Dr. Kroll, her boss at the hospital," he said, his accent unfamiliar to me. "Yes, we are," I replied, shaking his hand. I instantly felt uneasy around him. "Well, she's quite a sight," he said, "especially for someone like you." I didn't understand what he meant, but I replied, "She has a beautiful heritage." He laughed. I could tell he was being disrespectful, so I said firmly, "Look, if you ever speak about her like that again, there will be consequences. Just walk away." He stumbled back, looking surprised. I walked away from him to bring Manda her drink just as the song ended. She looked at my face and her smile faded. "What's wrong, love?" she asked. "I ran into someone rude, but I'm okay now." I kissed her and her friends giggled at us. When we pulled apart, she said, "Home! Now you big goof!" Her friends laughed as I picked her up playfully and carried her. We had a lovely night together. The next day, she gave me a curious look when she got home, speaking softly in her native language. I didn't want to know what she was saying. "Have I ever introduced you to my boss?" she asked. "I don't think you have." "Why?" I honestly replied. "Because I was on the 6th floor, showing off my ring to the nurses and mentioned your name. Suddenly there was a loud noise behind me. Kroll was standing behind me when I helped him pick up his clipboard and laptop. When we both stood up, I was shocked. He had a large bruise on his nose and both of his eyes were black. I asked him what had happened and he said he had run into something. "Only that while we are together, I'll make sure you are treated with kindness and respect," she said. She sighed. "He's my boss. If you upset him, he could make my job harder. He controls the schedule. He knows when I'm supposed to work and could adjust my hours to be the opposite of yours. Do you want that? I don't. So if you find yourself around him, please be on your best behavior." "I promise to be as polite as I can," I said. She looked at me seriously before smirking. I have to say, his bruises did bring some laughter among the staff. He's not very well liked. And that was all that was said about it. "Ewan, my friend, how are you? I'm in New York for work. Quite boring, really. I'd like to see you. Should I come down or should I make travel plans?" "Colonel, I mean Lord McLeish, how are you? I can't get away right now, but I'd like you to meet someone important to me. I just got engaged." Lord Archibald MacLeish, Earl of Firth, my old friend and commanding officer for 4.5 years. Come on, Ewan. I'll always be just a colonel to you. So, you've finally found someone special. I hope she's better than the last one. I never liked her much, but I didn't want to say anything. Good riddance. That was typical of the colonel, straightforward. Oh, I think you'll like her. You've always preferred the attractive ones. We talked for a while, setting up times to meet. I was sure Amanda would be impressed. He could be very charming when he wanted to be. Does she know about our past? No, Colonel. I want to tell her at the right time, so please don't mention it. He smiled. You Americans are so careful with your secrets. All right, I'll follow your lead, but you must tell her before the wedding. Once I tell Fergus and Colin, they will want to come, and they can't keep a secret when they've been drinking. I will, sir. I promise. We chatted a little longer before he hung up. Amanda, I have an old army friend visiting. I really want you to meet him. He means a lot to me. I'm sure he and his wife will be at the wedding. Finally, she laughed, someone to tell me about your past. I can't wait. She was definitely impressed when she met him. He was shorter and lighter than most, but he had a strong presence that made it hard not to stand up straight around him. At about 57, he was anything but ordinary. His family had served the crown for many generations. They had been involved in many battles and conflicts, starting with Waterloo and continuing through both world wars, and all the way to more recent events in the Falklands, Iraq, and Afghanistan. One of his ancestors had even been a military leader there in the 1870s. Even though he used a cane to walk, he still carried himself with a strong military presence. He took us out for dinner, sharing a little about our time serving together in the Middle East and Scotland. He said I was a loyal friend, which made her smile. She was enchanted by him before the evening was over, and she promised to visit him in Firth soon. As we drove away from the airport after dropping him off, she cuddled up to me. She knew me too well. Well, he dropped enough hints to make me curious. When will you tell me the real story about you two? He made it sound so interesting. I felt a little nervous. I'll tell you very soon, love. Before the wedding, I promise. After she fell asleep, I sat in silence, thinking about what she might think of my story. The wedding was coming up, and we were both feeling the pressure. Her mother decided to come at the last minute, and Amanda was very stressed. I probably didn't help much. I'm sure we'll get along, honey, and if we don't, it won't really matter because I will always love you. But if she tries to change your mind or put us down, I won't hesitate to ask her to leave. It doesn't matter how. I think my words surprised her. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, she replied softly, attempting a smile. I kissed her gently. Nothing will ever come between us. I'll always love you. Every decision I make from now on will be to support your happiness. You mean everything to me. Do you understand? She held me tighter and had tears in her eyes. Thank you, honey. I think I really needed to hear that. Speaking of things you need to know, I promised to share the story behind my tattoo and more about my life. Now is a good time. We were cozy on the couch with tea and scones on the table. She shifted until she was comfortable. Okay, honey, tell me about your younger days. I wish you had met my parents. They were amazing. We weren't rich, but I always felt loved and cared for. I was 11 when they passed away. It was a sad accident. They hit a slippery patch and went into a river. It was cold and very dark that night, and I would like to believe they didn't suffer. I noticed her grip tightened as I continued. I was an only child and would have ended up in the foster system if my grandparents hadn't taken me in. I can't imagine how my life would have turned out otherwise. They lived close by, and I spent a lot of time with them. I loved listening to my grandfather share stories about his experiences in Europe during the Second World War and how he fell in love with my grandmother. My grandmother ran a dance studio. I don't think she made much money from it, but it kept her active and away from Grandpa. She cared about him, but said she needed other interests to stay happy. I could waltz before I was 7 and dance the tango by 11. It gave me confidence, and when I got into middle and high school, I was ahead of others. Since I wasn't shy and could dance well, I became popular with the girls, though not so much with the boys. I brought a few friends to my grandma, and she taught them some simple steps. It really helped, and soon some of them took regular classes. One was on the football team, and when his balance and speed improved, he told the coach it was because of dance class. He came one night, watched us, and soon many on the team were taking lessons, even some of the coaches. The team got the name Dancing Fools of Central High. We even performed with the cheerleaders at halftime. People found it funny, but we won enough games to make the playoffs 3 years in a row, and once we even won the state title for our size. The school even brought her in to teach basic dance in PE class. When I was 13, one of Grandpa's old friends came to visit. He ended up staying with us. His name was Fergus McClough, sharing our last name. They had served together and become good friends. They taught me how to be a gentleman, how to box, and some useful skills. All in all, it was a good life. When I was 16, my grandfather passed away. It was the only time I saw Fergus tear up. He stayed in the house after the funeral, and 18 months later, he married my grandmother. Grandma passed away 4 years after the wedding, and then Fergus passed when I was 25. There's a strong tradition of military service in our family going back to the Civil War. A McClough has always been taught not to back down. My parents and grandparents, and later Fergus, instilled that in me. I joined the National Guard when I was 18. At first, we went out for floods and snowstorms, but when the Gulf War started, I chose to go active. It wasn't really a typical war. My part didn't last 2 months, but those were intense days that I'll never forget. I'm proud to say I carried on our family tradition. After 2 years, I returned to the Guard and went back to my factory job without losing any seniority. Then 9/11 happened, and everything changed. I didn't need to volunteer. They called us up, and off we went. The enemy was serious, and they did whatever it took to reach their goals. They didn't care who got hurt along the way. At first, we didn't realize how serious the situation really was. But we figured things out quickly. I took a moment to breathe and collect my thoughts. Amanda cuddled a bit closer to me. It was my second tour, and I found myself near a Scottish group. It was like a bee to honey for me. We would sometimes talk, and when I introduced myself with a hint of the accent my step-grandfather taught me, they were surprised. I smiled at the memory. I would ride the few miles between camps every week, or my 2 good friends, Charlie and Angus, would come by for a visit. My buddies could always tell when I had been with them because of how I spoke. One day changed everything for me. It was just like any other day, hot, dusty, making you wish you were anywhere else. The Scots were staying near an old castle from long ago during the time of the Crusades. The property had changed hands many times and had recently been an important mosque, marking a past victory. Yet it changed again and was now off-limits, which frustrated the Taliban. They hadn't seen much action lately, just routine patrols, so they were relaxed, cleaning their gear and grilling some lamb they had bought. No one wore their vests. It was too hot and they felt safe. I was there because Charlie, a piper, had just received his pipes. He was meant to play that afternoon, and when I arrived with drinks, they welcomed me like family. I closed my eyes, imagining it all. I handed the best bottle of scotch to their commander. "From my commander, sir," I said, watching his smile grow. "Wonderful," he replied with a grin. "Send my regards to your captain. We'll make a proper Scot out of you yet, lad." Then, without warning, everything changed. The first shots rang out, catching us off guard. The top NCO fell instantly, lifeless before he hit the ground. The lieutenant was wounded and the major fell right in front of me, hurt badly. I felt pain as I was hit, but my vest helped. It still broke a rib. They later learned many had gotten close without being noticed. There were at least 60 of them against the 40 Scots. 4 died right away, and 9 were seriously hurt. The rest were injured to varying degrees. At the time, we had no idea. Those who could fight back did. We feared we would be overwhelmed. I paused, recalling the sounds of chaos, the cries of the hurt. The dust and blood were still vivid in my mind. I grabbed the major and pulled him into the command building. He was furious. "Get me a weapon, lad. Now!" I grabbed a couple of light machine guns and a few magazines. He protected me while I quickly gathered supplies, urging me to take cover. I saw blood pouring from his shoulder. He needed help fast. He was a big guy, but fear gave me the strength to manage him easily. Angus arrived, and together they kept most of the attackers at bay. The others found what cover they could and shot back when they had a clear target. We helped the lieutenant, applying a bandage to his shoulder and giving him pain relief. The major was upset about the attack, frustrated because they were stuck in one place. A sniper had found a good spot and had already injured 3 men, with 2 of them not surviving. "Someone needs to take out that sniper. Provide cover so the others can fall back. I bet they are low on ammo," he shouted. I paused, feeling her hug me more tightly. I kissed her hair and sighed. It had been a long time since I thought about that day. I knew he was right. The atmosphere was tense, filled with cries of the injured and the sounds of distress. Looking at their weapons locker, I saw a couple of sniper rifles. I grabbed one and headed out the back. The commander and Angus thought I was leaving them behind. As I went out, I noticed Charlie's pipes and grabbed them without thinking. I ran into the mosque and climbed to the top of the minaret. There was a sound system there used for calling people to prayer. I needed to make a distraction, so I turned it on and began to play, moving around to draw their attention. It worked, as it took them a moment to understand what was happening. I realized that what I had done before starting to play was reckless, but it felt right then. Fergus had given me his old cap before I left for good luck. He wore it during a tough time at Dunkirk, one of the last musicians to perform in the thick of things. He had been shot twice but kept playing until he had to stop, with 2 bullet holes in his cap, missed shots that could have been fatal. I took off my helmet and put on the cap. When I started playing, it felt as if everyone froze, confused. I stopped when they focused their fire on me, shouting into the microphone, "Retreat! Go back now!" I had forgotten about the sniper until I was hit again in my vest, causing 2 more broken ribs. The bullet pierced my vest and lodged just beneath my skin. I fell, but my distraction had worked. Most of the troops made it to safety. By then, the Scottish soldiers had taken cover and were putting up a strong defense. Seeing their chance slip away, the attackers directed a lot of their firepower toward me. I was in a lot of pain and not familiar with the tool I was using, so I wasn't as accurate as I wanted to be. Through the scope, I spotted a group of men who seemed to be in charge, especially one who was shouting orders. I aimed for the leader but ended up hitting another man nearby. When he fell, they started to take cover. I fired the weapon until it was empty, hoping to keep them down long enough for me to escape. I was rubbing my side, remembering the pain. It worked until they brought out a rocket launcher. I saw it through the scope and quickly put down the rifle. I grabbed the pipes and rushed down the stairs. I almost made it when the rocket struck, causing everything to collapse. They later told me it took 2 hours to dig me out, and I was found curled up with the pipes, trying to protect them. By that time, many forms of help had arrived: helicopters, my unit, fighter planes, and more. Before I knew it, I was on a plane to Ramstein to recover. There was a British reporter with our group who had the presence of mind to record me pulling the major and lieutenant to safety. He even filmed me walking back and forth, playing the pipes while bullets whizzed by. He captured them digging me out of the rubble, still holding the bagpipes. It became big news in the UK as the major turned out to be the Earl of Firth, 33rd in line for the English throne. Mandy looked up at me and said, "Wait a minute. He's the colonel, right?" I nodded. Yes, he got promoted for his actions, leading the troops while he was seriously hurt. "What did you receive for that?" she asked. I chuckled. I got a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, and a serious talking to from my captain and the major for being reckless. I also received a Certificate of Valor signed by the Queen and Prime Minister, making me an honorary member of the British Army. I was injured, and Charlie had taken a hit in the arm while Angus suffered a bad concussion when the rocket struck the wall he was behind. He couldn't hear properly for 2 days, but his hearing gradually returned. The major had the worst injuries. His leg needed 3 surgeries to fix, and it looked like his fighting days were over. I was waiting for my orders, with 3 broken ribs and a deep cut on my arm that needed 8 stitches. A bullet had grazed my ear, which meant I would be off duty for at least 3 months. I had no idea who the major was or how much influence he had. Suddenly, a full colonel stood in front of me and suggested that I might need some medical leave. I was basically sent to England. The major offered us his townhouse in London as a thank you and left for a week to take care of personal matters. We had full use of the place, with a car available if we wanted to explore. Charlie was the adventurous one, and we had to pull him out of a couple of pubs before the end of our stay. Luckily, we didn't do anything to disrespect his home. The major returned with a guest. He introduced him as Charles. Charles shook our hands and mentioned that his mother wanted to meet us. He seemed like a good guy. I wasn't really interested in British culture, so I didn't recognize who he was. Angus playfully tapped the back of my head when Charles left. "That was Bonnie Prince Charlie, you fool. His mother is the Queen of England. Show some respect." We did get to meet the Queen, and she was very happy to meet the American who had saved her cousin. I still have the royal picture somewhere where she presented me with a certificate. I took a moment to collect my thoughts. Mandy laughed softly. "My fancy little mom will be shocked when she learns she has a son-in-law who has met the Queen. Is there more to the story?" "Well, since you asked, I stayed with the Major for another 3 weeks. Their doctors checked me, declared me ready for action, and I waited for my orders. The Major liked to take evening walks to strengthen his leg, so we made a habit of walking to the park and back. Charles and I usually joined him while Angus was back with his team. One day, 4 people jumped out of the bushes, shouting in Arabic and holding knives. It turned out that one of the guys we had confronted was important in a movement, and someone decided they needed to make an example out of him. We didn't think we just acted. I pushed the Major behind me as he insisted on helping, and Charles and I had a challenging time for a few minutes. If they had any training, it could have ended badly for us, but they were just students trying to make a point. Charles got hurt on his arm, and I got that scar on my chest. The Major actually managed to stop the last one by using the brass handle of his cane. I took down one of them, and Charles got another, but 2 escaped. They are still in prison, and will be there for life. There were other people in the park, and one recorded the attack on his phone while others called for help. It didn't take long before the police realized this was a serious situation, and soon some men in suits arrived, taking the Major to a safe location. He insisted we go with him, saying he wouldn't travel without his bodyguards, as he called us. They interviewed each of us separately, and my slight accent surprised them. When they learned I was American and a soldier, our people got involved. We were taken to a special hospital, treated, and then released, free to go. I paused, smiling slightly. Despite the scary moment, it had been one of the best times of my life. In the end, the same colonel who had seen me in Ramstein came to visit. He interviewed me alone and then smiled at me. "We have a bit of a dilemma here, son. The Major wants you to stay close. He believes you bring him good luck. He is about to be promoted, and his new rank will be the same as mine. As you saw with the recent attack, he is not completely safe, even here. He has asked you to remain as one of his bodyguards. This is not common, but the President received a call from a worried family member and agreed to help. You will spend the rest of your active duty here with the Major. This is called detached service, often used for advisors in other armies or political roles. Oh, and you've been promoted to Master Sergeant. Congrats! What could I say? We went to Scotland, where the Major lived, and were based at a nearby station, although Charlie and I were not there much. He took bodyguards seriously, so we were sent to bodyguard training. We learned the basics and took a driving course. After finishing that, he sent us to work with the SAS for more advanced training. Those guys were tough, the British version of Navy SEALs or Green Berets, and when they found out I was American, they gave me a hard time. I was in the best shape of my life when we were done. We even joined in their graduation exercise for fun. We had to move from one point to another without being found or caught. We actually finished first, which surprised them, but we had a secret. I was American and Charlie was black, even though he was 4th-generation Scottish. We borrowed some civilian clothes and a backpack, then hitchhiked to the check-in point, pretending to be students exploring. Charlie stayed quiet, and I used my thick Southern accent to help us blend in. I smiled, recalling the expression on the captain's faces when we arrived at the check-in point 10 hours before the others finished the task. We looked clean and ready. Manda looked at me, a little amazed. "That's quite a tale. How much longer did you stay?" "Almost 3 years. The colonel focused greatly on veterans' issues, advocating for those returning from service, especially those with disabilities. When Angus finished his tour, he came back and joined us as a civilian. He was a natural choice for a bodyguard. We brought our pipes along to perform at official events. No one paid much attention to the musicians, but we both carried our sidearms under our jackets and had extra magazines hidden away in our kilts. Most of the time was pretty dull, just visiting veterans' hospitals or attending ribbon-cutting events, until we got to the Firth VA Center. I paused, lost in thought for a while. Manda got up to make us some fresh tea before settling back down. "What happened then?" she asked gently. It was the peak of the Colonel's work. A brand new center opened, complete with counselors, therapy rooms, a gym, and even a daycare. And all services were free. He cut the ribbon while Charlie and I played, then we looked around the building and went to a gathering. The center was next to a river, and there was a big deck built over it. Most people went there to the food tables. We felt relaxed but cautious. The crowd mainly consisted of veterans and college students, part of the new staff, all checked out, so we didn't see any problems. The Colonel had his wife, his youngest sister, and her 6-year-old daughter, his favorite niece, with him for the ceremony. His sister was married to a nobleman from Denmark and was visiting. Angus noticed them first, 3 college students with large backpacks. We weren't sure how they got them in, but we guessed they were already inside and got them when the time was right. What made them stand out was that all 3 were blonde and had dark skin. "Backpacks 3 on blondes," Angus said quietly into his earpiece, and we spotted them right away. "I'll take the one in the middle," Charlie said as he dropped his pipes. "Left," I said, aiming at the biggest one. Angus didn't say anything. He just walked toward the one on the right. The kid saw him coming, yelled something in Arabic, and started fidgeting with his backpack. He was at the top of some stairs, and Angus tackled him, both of them rolling down. We felt the deck shake. I quickly pulled my weapon and aimed at my target. He fell to the ground, but his backpack opened, revealing a bomb. Following my training, I shoved the Colonel, his wife, and her sister away from the railing, thinking they would be safer in the water. I grabbed the child and held her as I jumped. Just as I cleared the railing, the bomb went off and I felt a jolt to my back. Fortunately, the water was only about 4 feet deep. When I came up, I saw the family huddled together. I lifted the child and walked over, handing her to her mother. I reached into my sporran and pulled out my backup weapon. "Here, Colonel. I think you might need this." That was all I said before I lost consciousness and fell into the water. They told me later my back was badly injured. The bomb was filled with small pieces. They took out 27 of them in the hospital. Those are the scars you see on my back and legs. Angus died trying to save people, covering the bomb with his body. Charlie hardly got hurt, hitting his target and throwing the backpack down river. It was found later, and the bomb squad was amazed it hadn't gone off. The bomb on the deck killed 3 people and hurt 6, but most had a few seconds to escape. It could have been much worse. I sighed, remembering. It had been a while since I thought about it. Charlie came to visit me 4 days later while I rested in bed. We congratulated each other for doing our jobs and making it through. He had brought a flask of brandy and we raised a glass. "To Angus," he said. "To Angus," I replied. "May he rest in peace." Charlie told me the funeral was the next day, and he wished I could be there to help him say goodbye to Angus. "What time and where is the funeral?" I asked. "At 1 o'clock at the Colonel's castle. Angus had no family, and the Colonel wants him buried with his family, saying we were as close to family as he had." Charlie left, and an hour later alarms started ringing as I disconnected myself from the machines. I was looking for my clothes when the staff rushed in to ask where I was going. "The Highlands," I answered as I adjusted my kilt. "I have a funeral to attend." The doctors tried to convince me to lie back down, but I was determined. They had me backed into a corner with an IV stand in my hands, and they stood in front of me with syringes. No one wanted to push me too hard because I warned them the first 2 would need their own beds. Then the Colonel arrived. "Soldier, stand down!" Out of habit, I snapped to attention. When he asked, I explained the situation. He noticed I looked pale. I was probably close to fainting when he turned to the doctors. "Have an ambulance and a skilled nurse ready. He will leave at 7, which should give him plenty of time. If he is not on my estate by 12:30, it will not be good for this hospital. Not good, understood?" They seemed to understand because I was up at 5:30, had breakfast, and was helped into my dress uniform, which had a small American flag on the left shoulder. My service ribbons and medals were attached to my jacket. I sat in a wheelchair until they brought Angus to the cemetery. When that happened, I stood, my wounds still healing, with Charlie by my side, and we played music for Angus. We stood tall and never missed a note, even as tears fell from both of us. I sank back into the chair as the last notes faded away. Instead of going back to the hospital, I was moved to a guest room in the south wing, with a doctor and a nurse available for support. Many of our old friends came to see Charlie and me, including some from Iraq. We honored our fallen comrades and raised our glasses to those who made it home, grateful we were among them. I stayed for 8 weeks before being declared fit. What happened then? I received a medical discharge along with a small pension and was sent home. Because of my injuries, I couldn't pass the annual physical, so I had to leave. The colonel wanted me to stay, but it was time to go. I returned home, went back to my job, and married Kim. I'm thankful now that things didn't go as planned, because if they had, I wouldn't have you. She had shed a few tears at my story, comforting me with her touch. I can't believe you didn't pass that test. You're the strongest person I know. I'm doing okay for now, but if I push myself too hard, I won't be able to keep going. After a few hours, I wouldn't be much help. She cuddled close, ready to share her story when I interrupted her. One more thing. The news went wild with the story and shared pictures of me falling over the edge with a child in my arms. She was fine, thankfully. There was a big fuss for a couple of weeks until the news shifted to something else. 2 months later, when I was finally better, the colonel had us wear our formal uniforms and took us to London. We drove to Buckingham Palace where Charlie received the St. George's Medal and was honored by the Queen. I could tell I had her full attention. What about you? I received the highest honor the British give to someone from another country, and I was also recognized at that ceremony. It's a title that goes away when I do, but when we marry, you'll be Lady Amanda McClough for life. She started to respond, but I raised my hand. One last thing. The Duke was so moved by my efforts to save his family that he brought me to Denmark. During a public ceremony, I received another honor there. I am also Sir Ewan McLaugh in the Danish court. Mandy's smile lit up her face. I can't wait to tell my mom. I would prefer if you kept it a secret until the ceremony. Let it be a surprise. She promised to try her best, but didn't make any promises. Oh, and the tattoo I have is the emblem of the Scottish regiment I served with, and the initials around it honor my fallen friends. Mandy sat quietly for a moment, thinking about what I had shared before letting out a sigh. I grew up in Africa. My father met my mother at a local gathering for visiting guests, and they fell in love. They were together for 10 years before separating. Mom wanted to leave Africa and move back to England, but Dad couldn't leave his business. He was a big importer and exporter and felt he couldn't just pick up and go without selling the business. He had some great offers but couldn't walk away from the company he built from the ground up. I was 9 when they separated and chose to live with my father. My mother wanted me raised in a more developed country, which didn't help her case in court. She was a foreign national while Dad was well respected in the area. The laws back then made it hard for her to win custody, so she could only have me during the summers. Dad was a good man, but really didn't know how to raise a child, especially a daughter. He loved me very much, but his job took him away for long hours. I went through many caretakers until my grandfather came one day. He wanted me to spend time with him and learn about my people, the Maasai. I lived in his village for 2.5 years, learning our traditions and ways of life. There was something special about the village, and I truly enjoyed my time there. I was becoming a proper Maasai woman, and my grandfather had even planned a marriage for me to the son of a chief from a nearby village. Then my mother came to get me. It caused quite a scene, but she had hired guards, and despite my protests, I was taken away in a car and brought back to the city. My mother had some money and connections, and a British court decided my past life was not right for me, granting her full custody. There was tension between my mother and father for years. He came to see me 3 times a year, and he was upset that he had to see me under supervision. To this day, he won't talk about her, and I have no idea what will happen at the wedding. She paused, wiping her eyes. I held her closer. I understand, I said. I talked to your father, and he agreed that this day will be just for you. He won't bring up the past. When your mother arrives, I'll sit her down and explain calmly that if she causes any trouble, she'll be on a flight back home within an hour. The colonel promised to support me, so if your mother is as taken with royal matters as you say, that might work. Really? You would send my mother away if she doesn't behave? I would if I had to. I think she'll get the message, though. Now please, go on. Amanda sat up and gave me a quick kiss before starting again. I was a bit of a handful as a kid. I got my tattoo when I was 16 for two reasons: to celebrate my heritage and to annoy my mom. It worked, and she sent me off to boarding school. Being away from my family's distractions helped me focus on my studies. I worked really hard to catch up. When I turned 18, I applied to Duke Medical School and got in. Now I'm here, ready for my future. Maybe not as thrilling as your story, though. I smiled and kissed her again. Maybe not in the same way, but it's still special. And your Maasai warrior will have to accept that you love and will marry someone else. I hope whoever tells him does it gently. And if he wants to argue about it, I'm ready. Little did I know how true that would turn out to be. All our friends had arrived, flown in by the Colonel. Her mother was a bit distant towards me until the Colonel mentioned how close we were, and that I had helped him several times. It was nice to see my old friends again, but when they went out without me, the Colonel and I had to step in and cover for them. Charlie got upset because a bystander commented on his nice dress shirt. He might not be able to say much until his mouth healed. On a sunny day in early June, the local church was full of happy faces. My boss sat in the front row along with the Colonel's wife and younger sister. Her second daughter was the flower girl, while her oldest, now a teenager, sat beside her and smiled, reminiscing about a cold, muddy day from long ago. Her husband, the Duke, was on the other side. Amanda's new stepmother was in the front row as well. She was a Maasai woman who admired her father, and he felt the same way about her. She seemed quite young, and Amanda looked like she might have a younger sibling soon. Surprising everyone, her grandfather was there too, dressed in traditional robes, along with two of his wives. Amanda's mother was a few rows back with her new husband. They did not seem nearly as joyful as Amanda's father and his new wife. I wore my military kilt, complete with ribbons and medals. Charlie and the Colonel stood by me as Cobist men. While we waited in front of the altar, I whispered a promise to God, pledging my love and commitment to my soon-to-be wife. When I opened my eyes, she appeared in the beautiful robes of a Maasai woman, adorned with shining bracelets and an elaborate necklace. She looked so stunning it took my breath away. Her father, also dressed traditionally, walked her down the aisle. Amy and Molly, her maids of honor, followed in Maasai robes with their hair beautifully braided. My groomsmen, Robbie, Mike, and Dave, stood beside me, while Amanda was joined by her friends from medical school. I knew they would talk about this wedding for years to come. The ceremony was led by the local minister and his bishop, with part of it in Latin, but we understood the important parts. After I kissed my new bride, the Colonel stepped forward, his strong voice filling the church. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce for the first time Sir Ewan McLaugh and his wife, Lady Amanda McLaugh. May their marriage be filled with joy, and happy little ones. The Duke stood up, with his wife translating, and did the same. Amanda's mother was so shocked that she fainted when she realized her daughter had married a knight from 2 kingdoms. When we left the church, many of my old regiment were there in full uniform. A local group of bagpipers had formed up on the steps, their swords raised high, creating a tunnel for us to walk through, cheering as we went by. The reception went on for hours and was talked about for years afterward. When enthusiastic Highlanders meet cheerful Southern ladies, fun things can happen. But we didn't see much of it because we had a flight to catch. We had 3 weeks for our honeymoon, 2 weeks of vacation, and the last week, a special gift from my boss. Amanda found it harder to take time off. Dr. Kroll was very vocal about his disapproval, but the Colonel stepped in, using his influence, and there was little Kroll could do. He was unhappy and promised to make things difficult for both Amanda and himself when they returned. Amanda and I traveled on a private plane with her father, his new wife, her grandfather, and his wives. After many long hours, we landed in Kenya. The Colonel and his wife were there for business, as he owned a large sheep farm which produced wool that was valued just like that from his Highland stock. He explained that while we might have dinner together once or twice, most of his time would be spent on his business. We arrived at the start of the lush season, and I was amazed by the bright colors. We spent the first week in Nairobi, where Amanda's father showed us around to his friends and business connections. They admired Amanda openly, while I felt a bit out of place with my bright red hair and blue eyes. After a few days, Amanda's grandfather joined us and insisted we spend time with him and his tribe, many who remembered Amanda from when she was young. She seemed a bit hesitant, but I was eager to go. Women aren't highly respected over there. Their status is often lower than the animals. Some men even value their livestock more. I pulled her close for a kiss as her grandfather and his wives watched. I'd be a poor Maasai man because you are more valuable to me than any sheep or cow. Her eyes sparkled as I let her go, smirking. Now, if chickens were involved, I might have to think again. You know how Southerners love their fried chicken. She playfully hit my arm and started chatting with her father at a speed that was hard to follow, even if I understood the language. Finally, her father approved our plan. We'll leave tomorrow morning. It's a long drive, so we'll need to pack plenty of water and snacks. I hope you enjoy it. Most visitors don't get to see the real Maasai way of life up close. Oh, and there's an old tradition where men can share their wives with friends if they choose. You won't mind, right? She laughed while she talked, but then became serious. It's not something people do much anymore. It's mostly faded with my grandfather's generation. It's still legal, but many can only afford one wife now. You have a bit of money, my dear. Maybe we can find a nice girl around 16. In this economy, we might be able to find a good deal. She laughed at my surprised expression. The only problem with that idea is that I would take care of the girl, and then you. We both agreed on private property, right? Besides, do you think a little girl could handle this? We were lying in bed while we talked, and after she said that, she stopped talking and started doing other things. I decided to be quiet too, turning her around and returning the favor. After a little while, we both started to speak again. Feeling relaxed, we cuddled and she giggled. Get some rest, dear. Tomorrow, we will go back in time. As we got closer to the village, I began to believe my bride. Watching a show on TV is one thing, but experiencing it for real is different. The land around us was full of flowers, and the people in their colorful clothes stood out beautifully. I noticed her grandfather smile for the first time since I met him as he was greeted by more family. Amanda was quickly surrounded by a group of women who I guessed were her childhood friends. She switched back to their language effortlessly, showing her happiness. Blushing, she took my hand, pulling me along and introducing me to her friends, who wouldn't look me in the eye. I figured it was a cultural thing. The atmosphere with the men felt different. Most were welcoming, but a few were a bit distant, and some even seemed unkind. One man who spoke English explained, "That is Laban and his friend. They believe we should turn away from modern ways and go back to old traditions. It's not realistic, right? We've grown too used to the improvements your culture has given us to go completely back." He smiled. "He doesn't like you because he sees you as an outsider and you married the girl he wanted." So this was the man her grandfather had chosen for her. Amanda's mother had stopped those plans. Everyone here was attractive, especially the younger crowd. I noticed there were very few overweight people. Amanda said it was due to their active way of life. Most women were taller than Caucasian women, and even though I was tall, most men had an inch or two on me. My new friend, who wanted me to call him Charles, took me to watch some of the dancing that the Maasai were famous for. I was watching a young man perform a traditional jump dance when one dancer stepped out from the group and stood in front of me, bouncing up and down. It was Laban, challenging me, trying to show who was the better man. Laban was actually shorter for his people, almost an inch shorter than me, which embarrassed him, so he tried to make up for it with a tough attitude. This did not earn him many friends in the tribe. "He is challenging you," said Charles with a smile. "He wants to make you look bad when you say no." I smiled at Laban and took off my shirt, standing in my cargo shorts and shoes. The men around me murmured in surprise when they saw my muscles and the scars from my past battles. They noticed the marks from bullet wounds and shrapnel, as well as a long scar on my chest. They saw me as a true fighter, and it seemed to make Laban even angrier. I stepped into the group, and as they sang, I started jumping. I had done high jump in school, and the memories helped me as I leaped. Normally, you would jump a few times and let others take turns, but after 4 jumps, Laban stepped in front of me with fire in his eyes. He began to jump alongside me, getting more upset when he saw I was a bit higher each time. I could see he was getting ready to push me, and when he charged at me, I remembered my days as a linebacker and pushed him back hard. He fell to the ground, and the singers stopped to watch in shock. I turned to walk away, but when I heard them gasp, I knew Laban was getting up. I quickly turned left. caught his arm and spun him away, sending him flying across the dirt of the village. He came to a stunned stop. "Tell him to get up and leave. Say that if he comes after me again, I will make sure he knows what it's like to be on the ground. He should stay away from me. I will be leaving in a few days, and he can go back to being in charge." I didn't know exactly what Charles said, but I could see Laban's anger in his eyes. Things were about to get intense when the chief, who had been watching us, said something to Laban, and he stormed off. Laban asked Charles to tell me to follow him, and Charles came along to translate. Amanda heard what happened and arrived with a group of women. Normally, a woman wouldn't be near the chief when he spoke to warriors, but he told her to stay to ensure the translations were correct. He asked a question, and Amanda took a while to respond. Later I learned she was sharing my military stories and how I had been honored in 2 countries. I could see that the chief said something that made her frown. Later in our tent she explained everything. "Grandfather was impressed with your stories and said you are a respected warrior and would likely be a junior elder in our culture. He also mentioned that Laban came to him trying to reclaim his old promise to me. Grandfather said that I am your partner now, that I belong to a different world, and we need to move on from the past." Laban was very upset, but the chief's word is final, and there's not much he can do. Just keep an eye on him, okay? He and his few friends thought the tribe should turn away from Western culture and return to their traditional ways. You really hurt his reputation by outdancing him and making him look foolish. I cuddled close to her, kissing her hair. "We'll leave soon, sweetheart. Don't worry too much about it." I sure got that wrong. 2 days later, I was sitting with her grandfather when I heard a scream that made me jump to my feet. It was Amanda. She came running toward me, her dress torn, looking scared, with Laban following her. She noticed me and ran to me, seeking safety, while Laban stopped and smiled. But his grin faded when I hit him right in the face, knocking him down. I was ready to give him a serious talking to when Charles and another man stepped in between us. The chief stood up, clearly angry, and wanted to know what was happening. Amanda translated for us. It turned out Laban had tried to take Amanda, thinking he was teaching her a lesson and pushing her back into her old role in his culture. While sharing mates was a tradition, his actions crossed a line. If Amanda went to the authorities, Laban could face serious consequences. However, this meant Amanda would have to stay and testify, and she didn't want to do that. I looked at the chief. "Okay, we won't press charges, but I want him to face me one-on-one. He needs to learn about reality, not the fantasy in his head." Amanda turned pale and tried to stop me, but it was too late. I had just challenged Laban to a duel, which was a serious matter in their culture. Laban woke up with his face in the dust again. As he started to clear his head, he heard the foreigner challenging him and smiled. Now he would have his chance to show what a true Maasai warrior could do. Quickly, he got to his feet, setting the rules for the duel, expecting the foreigner to back down and be afraid. But instead, the man just smiled and accepted, saying he needed 3 days to prepare, a custom for his people. Laban was pleased to see that Amanda looked frightened. Once he defeated his enemy, she would be his. It might take some effort, but he would make her obey. He took his friends into the bush to get ready. The chief tried to convince me not to go through with it, warning that the consequences for his people would be severe if it became known. I looked him in the eye and promised that if I won, I would never talk about it, and if I lost, there would be no punishment. The official story would say I died in an accident. He stared deeply into my eyes before shaking my hand, agreeing to my terms. He spoke a few words and left. Curious, I asked Charles what the chief said. He grinned. He said to try not to kill him. Amanda was scared, and I tried to reassure her. "Sweetheart, I have some advantages. I trained with the best in hand-to-hand combat and have practiced with swords and daggers until I'm pretty skilled. I've actually been in situations where I had to confront others directly, face to face under intense pressure. I don't want to cause any real harm, but he does need to learn a lesson, especially after his behavior toward you. We need to travel to Nairobi. I have to speak with the colonel." I returned to Nairobi, leaving Amanda with her grandfather for safety. Charles drove me to a nearby farm where, for a small fee, a local pilot flew me back. The arrangement was set for the pilot to wait a day and fly me back afterward. Once in Nairobi, I met with the colonel at Amanda's father's place. They both were surprised and concerned when I shared what had happened. "Are you sure about this, lad?" the colonel asked, raising his brows. After I confirmed, he made some calls. I don't know how, but he managed to find a replica of a traditional two-handed claymore sword, almost exactly like the one I had at home, along with a shield. We also picked up a couple of British fighting knives I was familiar with from a theatrical supply store. The colonel looked impressed, giving a nod of approval. "You're not leaving me out of this," he chuckled. "I wouldn't miss it." After sending the farmer back with thanks, we boarded a larger plane the colonel had arranged. We learned that Laban had been spreading rumors that I'd left for good and planned to take Amanda as his own. He was not pleased to see me return, especially with her father by my side. Amanda was taken aback but could see the plan's value, occasionally smiling at the thought. "He's in for a real surprise," she laughed, settling into my arms. The next morning, Laban stood, fully prepared in traditional attire. His face and hair were painted a vivid red, and he carried his lion spear and shield standing tall before his supporters. A murmur spread through the crowd when they saw me. I had shaved my beard the night before, and Amanda had woven my hair into traditional rows, presenting me as a warrior of the old ways. I appeared bare, but for a belt holding the essentials. My whole body had been painted with blue patterns, with a white stripe across my forehead and one crossing my chest diagonally along an old scar. Amanda had done the painting with precision and dedication. In a bold gesture of her own, Amanda had cut her hair, a Maasai tradition for women upon marriage. She smiled with a mixture of excitement and pride. "It's tradition here," she said. "After this, we'll have a full Maasai wedding as planned, so be careful, I want you in one piece." With her support, I felt ready for what was to come. The sun rose and we prepared to face the challenge ahead. "I'm sure this will give the girls something to think about," she said, "and I want you to look excited when you see him. A few people say he's not all that impressive. This will remind him he's up against a better man." Just before we left the tent, she leaned in and gave me a big kiss. "Be careful. And if you get hurt, I will make him pay." Everyone looked shocked when we stepped out. Along with me, Amanda wore the same blue face paint and she had on her kilt. People gasped and quickly moved out of our way. I was surprised to see that the colonel had brought in 4 trustworthy pipers. They formed an honor guard, 2 in front and 2 behind, playing a lively tune as we walked to the center of the village. Laban stared in amazement at the man before him and his friend. They looked like characters from an old story. For the first time, he thought he might actually lose. He shook off the idea. This was just a man, and soon his blood would mix with the blue paint. The chief asked them not to fight, but when they refused, he requested that they stop before it got too serious. The foreign fighter agreed to hold back, but Laban did not. They moved to the open area. It bothered Laban to see the man smiling. He was a warrior who had defeated a lion alone, something that was not allowed. No one should stand a chance against him. Laban struck his spear against his shield in a traditional salute, showing he was ready. The foreign man did the same, but then dropped his shield and took hold of his large sword with both hands. Laban believed he had the advantage, but the man fought fiercely. For 5 minutes, they exchanged blows until Laban saw an opportunity. He thrust his spear, aiming for the man's heart, but the strike met only air as the man spun, bringing his sword down and breaking Laban's spear. I had to give him credit. He wasn't afraid. As we fought, I felt he wanted to leave me on the ground. Finally, I got him to stretch too far and broke my spear where it connected to the handle. He quickly dropped the broken part and stepped back to draw his sword, then burst out laughing when he saw I wasn't chasing him, instead waiting calmly with my weapon lowered. The claymore sword had a longer reach than the traditional Maasai blade, and I used it to my advantage, making him work hard and teasing him while the crowd cheered. I let him charge me and then stepped aside, hitting him with the flat of my blade. His clothing did little to soften the blow. I wasn't sure if he was screaming from pain or from feeling embarrassed. I got a bit careless, and he managed to land a hit, leaving a small cut on my stomach. It hurt a lot and looked very different against the blue paint. Amanda nearly fainted. Laban stood back, grinning, until I dipped my finger in the blood and made lines on my forehead. I'd like to say I easily defeated him, but he was a tough opponent. We fought in the village square at least 4 more times before he made a mistake. That mistake cost him dearly, and I swung my sword against his head with a loud thud. He fell down right away. I dropped the sword and took out a smaller knife to cut off the elaborate top knot he wore. It felt like the right thing to do at that moment. I held the hair up as I walked toward Amanda. Her expression switched from amused to horrified, and I sensed something was off. Instead of moving aside or fighting back, I dropped to the ground, causing Laban to trip over me. As he tried to get up, I had my knives ready, and without hesitation, I stabbed a knife through his foot. Before he could scream, I grabbed his clothing. "Submit or you'll regret it." He didn't understand my words, but he got the message. He dropped his sword and raised his hands in surrender. To make my point clear, I gave him a painful cut. He wouldn't be bothering anyone for a long time. I managed to get up, and Amanda rushed to my side. I walked slowly to her grandfather. "It's over, understand? He fought well, but he's also foolish. If he doesn't change, the next fight could end badly for him. If he even gives us a bad look, I won't hesitate to finish what I started. Make sure he understands." One of the musicians was also a medic, and he treated my cut before checking on Laban. Laban was taken away in shame and defeat. Amanda's father later told us he refused help from modern medicine and relied on a witch doctor to heal him. His foot got infected, and by the time he sought real help, it had to be removed. He left the tribe soon after, and no one knew where he went or even looked for him. We had our traditional wedding, and the celebration lasted deep into the night. Her father arranged a plane for us, and we left the next day. Her grandfather gave me a beautiful bracelet, and Amanda explained it symbolized that I was now recognized as a junior elder in their tribe. He also gave me a Maasai name, which meant Red Warrior. I realized it was a great honor, so I thanked him a lot before giving him the claymore and the knives. We stayed in Nairobi for 2 more days before heading to Cardiff to visit her mother. It was less of a regular visit and more of a big show. She made sure everyone knew her new son-in-law was the famous Mad Yank. She shared old pictures of me with the Queen and the royal family. Each day we went somewhere fancy for tea. Amanda was getting a bit frustrated, but I smiled. Let her enjoy her moment. It's not every day a dream comes true. I have a surprise for her. Just wait and see. That morning, a shiny Rolls-Royce picked us up and we got in. There was a note on the seat. "Sorry, my friend, but I have work to do. Please forgive me. I'll see you at the castle." We took a 2-hour drive through beautiful scenery and arrived at a castle. Later, I learned it was the summer home of Prince Charles and Camilla, although I didn't know this at the time. Amanda's mother, Claire, knew, and she almost fainted when the colonel walked up with Charles and Camilla, who were pushing a stroller with their youngest grandchild, a little girl. 3 nannies were nearby. The parents were out for the day and would return before dinner. We had a nice tea, but Charles and the colonel talked so much about horses that it got a bit dull. Camilla finally spoke up. "Enough, you two. You have your granddaughter here and you've hardly paid attention to her all day. Her parents will be back soon, and then she'll leave." They both quickly changed the topic, and Charles held the baby. We got to see the future King of England playing with her, making silly sounds as the baby laughed. Claire even got to hold her for a few minutes, and she made sure Amanda took lots of pictures. It was probably the best day of Amanda's life. She mentioned how her Facebook nearly crashed with all the attention it got. Just before we left, Claire pulled me aside. "I know I can be a bit much, but I really want what's best for my daughter. And you know what? I think she has it. Expect more visits, especially when grandchildren arrive. Now, go on and make sure Amanda calls me now and then." We left England and returned to North Carolina. The band decided to take a break while I was gone. Tony was focused on getting custody of his daughter since his ex was getting remarried, and Mike had a few projects on his mind. Molly, Rob, and Amy were feeling bored. When Robbie told them he and Molly planned to perform some shows on their own, no one was upset because everyone knew they were the serious musicians in the group. Amy joined them to keep an eye on things, as she told Dave. They found a guitarist, bassist, and drummer, which allowed Rob to sing more. He had gained a strong stage presence, and they performed well together as a group called Rob and Molly. After their last show, a man in a suit approached them and handed out business cards to Molly, Rob, and Amy. He was an agent who showed interest in them. When they explained that this was just a side project, he smiled and said, "I'm not looking for anyone else, just the 3 of you. Your voices and stage presence will draw in the crowds. Think about it and contact me." This was the start of changes for the Tub Thumpers, though we didn't realize it yet. For a few more months, we continued to play, adding new songs. We played our version of Galway Girl with me on the accordion, and I even got to sing it. The audience started to join in, singing Day I loudly. Robbie and I arranged a version of Some Nights with 3 microphones. I played my pipes, Molly used a floor tom, and Robbie had his snare drum, which gave it a lively feel. Everyone sang along while I mimicked the auto-tuned voice with my pipes. Dave was a fan of Rapalja and soon got all of us listening too. He suggested we perform Loch Lomond, so we did it with just our voices at first, letting Dave sing the lead. In the end, Molly and I shared a 5-minute tune on the fiddle and pipes that usually quieted the crowd. After many requests from our fans, we even tried a version of Danny Boy that was well received. I was a Rod Stewart fan and had seen him perform several times. One day I was in our living room playing the sweet intro of Rhythm of My Heart on my accordion. It was one of my favorite songs about a soldier coming home. Amanda sat beside me, resting her head on my shoulder, enjoying the music. I could tell she wanted to talk, so I put the accordion down and gave her a hug. "What's on your mind?" I asked. She looked concerned, which made me realize it was serious. "Can we talk about having a baby? My residency is nearly over and it could be a good time." I looked into her eyes until she started to feel uneasy. "We don't have to talk about it now, it's just the best thing you could ever say to me. I wanted to bring it up earlier, but I wanted to wait until you were settled. You would be a wonderful mother, and I hope I can be a good father." Now she was crying with big tears in her eyes. "Really?" "Absolutely, come with me." I took her to the bathroom and removed her birth control pills, flushing them away. "How about now? Do you believe me?" "Yes, but you are so wrong. I see you with kids, and I know you'd be an amazing father. Now let's get ready." She was almost late for work. Dr. Kroll could be quite difficult, and she often met with the other women there to share experiences. If you were easygoing or a bit charming, you were treated better. Making waves can make life tough for a long time. I would feel relieved when she no longer had to put up with him. She didn't say much, but I could tell she was anxious about finding a job. Not many new doctors stay close to home, and their grades had a lot to do with the jobs they got. Amanda had great qualifications, even with a few not-so-good reviews from Dr. Kroll, so she would land good interviews. She had trained to be a pediatrician because she loved working with kids, but there weren't many local jobs. I knew this was weighing heavily on her mind, so I took her for a drive and parked in an empty driveway. You could just see the old remains of a foundation. In the South, we called this a home place. It was from my old house. The land had been in our family for 150 years. I knew I would never build there again since most of the surrounding land was now for industrial use. I had received many offers as the economy improved. It was time to let go and find our own home place. "What is this place?" she asked. "This is your freedom, dear. Originally, it was 23 acres. I added another 17 when the economy took a hit. The house burned down while I was in Scotland. I put the insurance money into a trust the Colonel set up for me so no one can touch it. Kim was upset when she saw it in the asset disclosure. She couldn't take it anyway, and I didn't want to hear her pressure me about selling it, so I never told her I owned it. I'm giving it to you to do what you think is best." "Thank you, dear, but what will I do with 40 acres?" she asked. "You're going to sell it. The property has become very valuable recently. Look around and count the new businesses and construction you can see from here. One developer is interested, hinting at wanting to acquire some of the land. This way, if he wants it, he'll have to make a proper bid like everyone else. The lawyers say it could sell for anywhere between $250,000 to $400,000, depending on how badly someone wants it. That should be enough to help you start your own practice or buy into one. The auction is in 3 weeks, so we'll know more then." I was glad I was close when her eyes widened, and she almost fell. I caught her just in time. I kissed her and breathed in her hair as she woke up. Her hair was now a lively mess of short curls that I really liked. Amanda mentioned she wanted it a bit longer, but not as long as before. I loved it however she wore it, but I wasn't a fan of very short styles. She promised me she wouldn't try that again. She startled awake, letting out a joyful shout, and immediately jumped up and down, kissing every part of me she could reach. She calmed down, but tears of joy kept coming. "Thank you, dear. You have no idea how worried I was," she said. "Oh, I had a pretty good idea," I replied. "You don't love and care for someone as deeply as I care for you without noticing certain things." She held my hand on the way home, feeling relaxed. But then she suddenly sat up straight. "We can't spend that money on me. That could buy a really nice house." I surprised her even more. "Don't worry, love. Half of everything I earned while working for the Colonel, along with the pension and insurance money I mentioned, is saved in an account in the Seychelles, managed by the Colonel. He assures me we can buy any home we want within reason. So focus on your career, and when you're not working, start looking for a house." For a moment I thought she might faint, but instead she smiled. "What if I said I wanted to live on the moon? I'd start shopping for rockets. You should know that you are the most precious thing in my life, and I would do anything to make you happy. Any children we might have will carry that love forward. Do you understand?" She sighed, leaning back again. "I'm starting to," she said softly. After that, "Rhythm of My Heart" became our song, and we sang it to each other as a lullaby, getting ready for our future kids. Naturally, we added it to our shows, using it as a closing song. We made it longer and softer, repeating the last verse while standing with our arms around each other in front of the microphones, without our instruments. Looking back now, those were probably my favorite moments in our history as a band. When we wanted to add a new song, we would gather the lyrics and sing together, practicing harmonies before we even brought in the instruments. We usually sat on stools, side by side, sharing one microphone. I felt it brought us closer together. While Manda focused on her career and began house hunting, we worked more but enjoyed it less. I was starting to worry that the band might not last much longer. Manda and I had a favorite restaurant, a Mexican place we visited on one of our first dates. I knew the mariachi band there, and one day I noticed that Juan was missing and asked about him. "Juan is quite sick. He has cancer. They caught it, but his hospital bills are huge. He had to leave the band and take extra shifts at his regular job. It's tough for him, and Maria is really scared he might collapse." I thought about it and discussed it with the band. We called in a few favors, rented the local high school football field, arranged for security and medical help, and held a benefit concert. For $12, you could see 6 bands and enjoy 10 hours of entertainment. The local Hispanic churches set up food booths, each trying to outdo the others with spicy and delicious dishes, and all profits went to help Juan. We were the headliners, so we performed last. There was a rock band, a country group, a solo blues singer whom many of us jammed with, a young Mexican band that really energized the crowd, a beach band, and us. Juan's band played while everyone else got ready to perform. We had practiced together a few times for this big moment. After our set, I took a moment to speak to the audience. "On behalf of Juan and his family, thank you all very much. His family has been part of this community for 35 years. Juan and I have been friends since we played football in high school. This money will help him with his expenses and ensure his family has a good life." He was meant to say something, but he's feeling a bit overwhelmed. Instead, he has decided to join us on stage as a thank you. Let's welcome him. The crowd cheered as he came up, holding his trumpet. Even though he was recovering, he looked a bit frail. He waved and then stepped back. "Well, folks, that's the show. Almost. His band, my band, Summer Sounds, and some others who played tonight have come together for a special finale. The next few songs are our way of saying thank you for your support. Let's do this." His band wore mariachi outfits with big sombreros. The beach band wore shorts and bright flower shirts. 2 guys from the country band had on western shirts and cowboy hats, while the rest of us wore kilts. It was a colorful sight. We kicked things off with a song featuring Molly singing "In These Shoes" by Christy McCall. The crowd loved it, and Juan played a fantastic trumpet solo while the beach band filled in with their horns. I didn't play an instrument for this one, but I joined in on the chorus. After that song, we switched to "You Can Call Me Al" by Paul Simon, with Robbie singing lead. Amanda was on stage with us, taking a rare break from her usual duties, and all of us joined together to dance to the beat. As the night grew darker, we moved around the stage while Dave played a key part on bass. The crowd was excited when we finished playing 10 minutes later, and the stage lights went off. At first, the audience thought the show was over, But then a spotlight focused on me, and I began to sing. Wanna jitterbug, wanna jitterbug, and the band jumped into Wake Me Up Before You Go Go by Wham. The girls lined up behind me, moving their hands just like in the music video, and we all let loose, jamming for about 8 minutes. A kid from the Mexican band played an amazing organ solo that got the crowd excited. Amy and Molly were on one side of the stage, while Amanda and I were on the other. We had practiced doing cartwheels across the stage before the audience arrived, and I wore my black swimwear. The girls were supposed to wear full black underwear, but when the crowd started cheering, I realized they had chosen different styles. We all ended up together, laughing a lot. This would be a benefit that the audience would remember for a long time. The applause and cheering lasted for 5 minutes. None of us knew that a local TV station sent a crew to film a short piece about the benefit since it was a Saturday and there wasn't much news. They created a nice feature, focusing on our last song. They had to blur the part with the girls doing cartwheels, but it was so popular that they showed it again the next morning. 4 or 5 people posted our performance on YouTube, and we received almost 1 million views within a month. One morning show, wanting to take advantage of our popularity, invited us to appear. After some planning, we all showed up. The host, making small talk, asked for our group name. We wore kilts, the mariachi band wore their traditional outfits, and the beach band's horn players had bright shirts. I quickly blurted out the first name that came to mind. Jalapeno Haggis. The name stuck, and the agent Molly and Rob met helped us make a one-time deal. We recorded 4 songs, including the ones from the concert and a good original written by Rob and Molly, and sold it on iTunes. We decided to give all the money to Juan. Tony, Dave, and I started to feel tired of the band. We created it for fun, but it began to take on a life of its own. Amy's agent was encouraging us to sign with him and perform full-time, playing 4 or 5 nights a week across the country, even internationally, where our music might be more appreciated. Tony quickly dashed that idea. I want my daughter back. My ex is remarrying, and her new partner doesn't get along well with Amber. There's no way I would leave my steady job to tour. That would ruin my chances of getting full custody. You guys can go, but not with me. Then he paused and smiled. Besides, I've been talking to Bernie a lot. Her daughter and mine are best friends, so we've been spending time together. Things have changed. Very good things. It seems I might end up with 2 daughters and a wonderful new partner. He had told us earlier that he saved every dollar he earned from the band for a time like this. Dave and I were happy for him. After he and his wife parted ways because of her affair, he faced many lonely years. It took him quite some time to learn to trust women again. Bernice, who was kind and attractive, added a spark to his life. Whenever she came to events or just to chat in the barn, a special connection formed between them. Even their daughters noticed and giggled, calling each other my sister. Dave felt similarly. I'm really tired of finding someone to look after the kids. Janine is acting out a bit, and the school counselor says it's because her routine has changed. I haven't talked to Amy yet, but it's important. I hope she understands. Congratulations, Tony. A good woman's love truly means a lot. That comment came back to surprise him in the weeks that followed. Tony and I were sure Amy would want to continue. She enjoyed the attention she was getting. I sensed that serious talks were coming soon. Like you guys, I'm almost finished. Amanda will soon be a doctor and is considering partnerships or maybe starting her own practice with a couple of senior doctors interested in part-time work. We did really well at the land auction with several developers bidding against each other. And we ended up winning, going way over what we expected. I might get a promotion at work, which means more responsibility. I told her I would leave the band in a few months, and she agrees that it's time to move on. We sat together, remembering our journey, and agreed it was worth it. We planned to share this news with the others after our next few performances so they could think it over. However, things changed when Robbie rode home with me 2 weeks later, hesitating until I urged him to share what was on his mind. Dwayne wants to sign us to a contract and even has a record deal ready. That's great, Robbie, but what's the problem? There must be something bothering you. He quickly spilled it out. He only wants me, Molly, and Amy, saying the band would be more appealing with younger members. I could not help but be curious. What do you and Molly think about that? We think it's unfair. We wouldn't be here without you and Tony. It feels disloyal just to consider it. Seeing him surprised by my smile, I encouraged him. I think you should go for it. Tony, Dave, and I have already discussed this, and we're all ready to move on. Listen carefully. I don't trust Dwayne at all. Get a good lawyer, maybe the one I used for my divorce. They have a team focused on intellectual property law, and it would be smart to seek their advice and listen to it. I can call Maggie to help you if you want. But listen, Robbie, this is important. I know you and the others want music to be your future, so be careful. If you're not, you might lose control and not earn much. Don't sign anything before letting the lawyers check it first. He sighed in relief that I wasn't upset, but then looked worried. Dwayne has a contract ready, and he's really pushing us. He says he can't help us until we sign it. That should raise a red flag. Don't do it, Robbie. Take care of yourself and Molly first. He agreed to discuss it with Molly and to wait for the lawyers to review the contract. Then something he mentioned earlier came back to me. What about Amy? If he was nervous before, now he looked truly distressed. Promise me, really promise, that this stays between us for now. Amy is really excited about going on the road, seeing the country and everything. Molly thinks there might be something happening between Amy and Dwayne, and that's affecting her choices. Well, that was news I didn't want to hear. I have strong feelings about cheating, and I started to wonder. Thinking it through, I realized Amy had been keeping her distance from us. She and Dave have 2 kids, a 10-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. It would break Dave's heart if Robbie's suspicion turned out to be true. Be careful, Rob, and make sure Molly is too. If Amy is being unfaithful and Dave finds out, it won't end well. But I'll tell you this. I plan to talk to Amy soon. If she is thinking about being with Dwayne, she needs to be honest with Tony about how she feels and walk away. It will hurt him, but he might not resent her as much if he hears the truth instead of discovering she was unfaithful. I thought about it for 3 days. I tried to catch Amy alone after a few shows, but she left quickly. I got the feeling she was avoiding me. Dwayne, still trying to impress us, secured a job we couldn't refuse playing at the opening ball of the Grandfather Mountain Highland Games, one of the oldest and most respected events in the South. The ball was by invitation only, a gathering of the upper class. I found the woman in charge to be annoyingly condescending, and knowing I might never get to play there again, I decided to speak up. Listen, we've been doing this for a long time, so we know what we're doing. Please let us set up in peace. If you don't like our show, you don't have to pay us. Sound fair? It was clear that she wasn't used to people speaking their minds. She huffed in surprise when she finally found her voice. I've never met someone so rude in my life. I shrugged. That's not my concern. Maybe you should spend time with musicians who don't hold back. You might learn a thing or two about what rudeness really is. I need to set up this equipment quickly so I can get on with being a bit cheeky toward people who deserve it. Have a shiny ball in the meantime. If you're lucky, you might spot a grumpy waiter or bartender. One can only wish. She stormed off. I looked at Tony and Dave, who were trying hard not to laugh but failing. Then I glanced at Amy, who looked shocked, and at Molly, who was just smiling as she twirled her bow around. We heard someone laughing loudly for a moment. Then Robbie came back, wiping tears from his eyes and trying not to smile. The ball was quite something. We were playing first, and then a full orchestra was going to take over for waltzes and such. I looked over at the head table and saw the woman I had spoken to sitting next to the colonel, chatting away. They often invited some notable Scot as a guest of honor, and this time it was his turn. He caught my eye while the woman talked, his face showing a small smile. He told me about the conversation the next day while we stood together, watching the parade of tartans move around the field. You really got under her skin. I almost couldn't breathe from holding back my laughter. It was even funnier when we spoke to the main supporter of the games and she thanked me for coming. Oh, I replied. I'm truly honored to be at this event. I was even more excited when I found out an old friend would be playing in the band. He's done a lot for both Scotland and America. Really? How does an earl meet an American bagpiper? Well, we first met in Iraq when he saved my life and the lives of my men. I ran into him again in London, where he saved me from danger once more with help from one of our soldiers from Iraq. After that, I considered him my good luck charm and had him assigned to me as my bodyguard and piper. Was he really a lucky charm? I couldn't stop smiling when I talked about how you and some old friends saved me once again, and how you personally saved me, my wife, and my sister and her child. You might remember him from those times. The press called him the Mad Yank. There was a big article about him in the Times, sharing his story since he began working with me, even featuring photos of the Queen giving him medals, and another of him being knighted. A week later, the royalty of Denmark did it again. My sister is a duchess in Denmark, and there was even a picture of him jumping through the air while protecting my niece. Quite a remarkable man are you and McClough. And be ready, my friend, they are thinking about having you as the guest of honor next year, a local hero with Scottish ties and a true knight to celebrate. I bet the woman who spoke harshly to you yesterday will be much friendlier today. We had a wonderful day. Robbie took part in a competition where he tossed bags over a bar. He didn't win, but he had a lot of fun. I did some traditional dancing and played music during the contest, not as a competitor, but as a guest because they recognized me. Dave surprised everyone by coming in second in the hammer throw, his strong arms showing as he swung the hammer. Dave was a solid guy, a bit round in the middle, but he had strong muscles underneath. I thought it would not be wise to make him upset, which reminded me that I needed to talk to Amy. We all wore colorful kilts representing my clan, and marched together as I carried our flag in the closing ceremony. The group organizing the event warmed up to me, and I was polite, saying I would think about it. If there were no conflicts, I would be honored to join. After the games, we gathered in the barn for practice and announced that we were done as a band. Everyone knew except Amy, who looked both sad and relieved at the same time. Dave said he was unhappy but glad to focus on his family. I noticed Amy seemed a bit uneasy when he mentioned family. We had 8 more shows lined up and stopped taking new bookings. We held a farewell party at O'Doul's, and it was so full that we had to turn people away. To honor our fans, we performed another show on Sunday afternoon for those who couldn't get in on Saturday. Even then, we still had to turn people away. We were all surprised at the tears and the number of kilts worn to show support. It seemed we had made a difference in people's lives. It was our last show, and we had tears in our eyes too. Well, our last show in the country. Dwayne, with help from the Colonel, arranged for us to perform at 3 festivals, 1 in Ireland and 2 in Scotland. We thought it would be a fantastic way to end and agreed to go. It would be a 2-week trip. We also decided to make it a family trip. Mike was taking Bernie, his daughter, along with her friend, and Dave was bringing his 2 kids, despite Amy's worries. We're only performing 3 times in 2 weeks, so we'll have plenty of time for family activities. It will be a trip to remember. The kids are old enough to cherish these moments. We're even going to stay in a real castle for 3 days, thanks to the Earl. What reason do we have not to take them? Eventually, Amy agreed, and I knew I had to talk to her soon. We had enough notice to plan our vacation. I had built up enough time off to feel relaxed. When my boss found out the reason I was taking it, and that I would focus on my main job when I returned, he smiled and said, "Good. The assistant production manager's job is going to open up soon. One reason you weren't a top candidate was your outside interests, but that's not a problem now. You're a strong candidate. Go for it. And when you get back, we will talk." Dave and Tony had enough seniority to take time off, so everything was lined up. Even Amanda managed to get a week off, despite Dr. Krall's objections. She was going to join us for the 2nd week and be there for our final performance. I could see the Colonel's influence on that decision. We were like a traveling group, with all our instruments and luggage. People definitely noticed us. Amanda and I felt a bit pulled apart since this was the first time we'd be separated, and neither of us liked it at all. We began our trip in Ireland. The band decided to put Molly and Rob in the spotlight to help them shine during their solo performances. I still sang a couple of songs, but the others were all theirs, including 4 original songs that were turning out quite well. Tony and I helped them with the arrangements, and though they were still in progress, we could see the improvement. With those 4 songs, a few traditional tunes, and a couple of covers, they would have a solid first CD. We performed in front of about 50,000 people, and I'm proud to say we were well received. It was thrilling for all of us since we had never played to such a large audience before. I was happy to see the focus on Molly and Robbie. They both got invited to join in with some larger acts, which was great exposure for them. After the concert, we took tours, visited the Book of Kells, kissed the Blarney Stone, and did as much sightseeing as we could. When we arrived in Scotland, the kids were thrilled to stay in a real castle, and they loved their rooms. Millicent took a special interest in the children, organizing horseback rides, taking them to local sites, and generally caring for them. Soon, they wanted to spend all their time with Aunt Millie. The Colonel and his wife had never had children for reasons I didn't know. His wife adored the kids and urged me to start our own family. They will be the closest thing I'll ever have to grandchildren. Just so you know, when they get older, they will be coming to spend summers with us. Amanda is already on board with it, although she plans to take them to Kenya as much as possible. Her words touched me deeply, and on impulse, I hugged her. She was a bit stiff at first, except for a quick kiss on the cheek since we had never been so close. But she soon relaxed and returned the hug, gently patting my cheek when we let go. Without meaning to, I made her tear up. You know, our first son might not be happy about being named Archibald, but I think our first daughter will be fine with Millicent. Those were their given names. The thought of her living on through them overwhelmed her, and she quickly left the room. The Colonel smiled and said, "You've done it now. She may never forget this when they come to visit." My life just couldn't get any better. I was really looking forward to Amanda arriving. We hadn't been able to conceive yet, although we had tried. I secretly hoped we could while we were here, making our first child a true Scottish baby. She was a bit worried, but her doctor, a good friend, reassured us. "Keep trying. Sometimes it takes a while with the first one. Then suddenly you're expecting. Relax and enjoy this time. Your priorities will change once the baby arrives. Don't worry, it will be a good change." So when she called to say she couldn't come, I felt crushed. "I can't come, honey," she said when she could speak more clearly. "David had a family emergency and there's no one left to cover. I'm so sorry." "I'm sad too, love, but soon you'll be your own boss and we won't have to worry about things like this anymore. I love you." She cried a bit longer before hanging up. The band noticed I was down, so they tried to lift my spirits. My mood brightened when Charlie appeared unexpectedly. After 24 years of service, he was now retired and working for the Colonel. I was even more surprised when some of our old friends showed up, including the lieutenant I had helped years ago. The doctors saved his arm, but he would always have limited use of it. I expressed my sympathy right after he learned he'd have some challenges ahead, and he smiled back. "No worries. Living with 1.5 arms is much better than not being here at all." It turned out that after retiring, many of them joined a band made up of veterans, performing at parades and special events. They were even playing at the festival, with 36 pipers and 14 drummers. The lieutenant was now the drum major, saying it was something he could still do well. Since the event was being recorded for television, I decided to do a tribute for Amanda, hoping it would cheer her up. The band was all in favor, and we made plans. As I stepped out of the elevator for my night shift, I smiled and greeted almost everyone in the hospital. Many praised my kindness, especially towards children. My heart swelled as I thought about how in 7.5 months I would become a mother for the very first time. I visited my friend that morning to confirm my thoughts. I learned I was definitely pregnant, 6 weeks along. In joy, I hugged her, and we both shed tears. When I calmed down, she asked if I was going to call Ewan with the news. "No, I want to see him in person and watch his face when he discovers our dream is about to come true." I'm sure it will be worth the wait. My smile faded when I saw David at the nurse's station. "David, what are you doing here? I thought you were out of town for a family emergency. How is your father, by the way?" He looked at me strangely. "Dad's been gone for about 4 years now. I'm here to take Sally to lunch since I suddenly have a week off. What was so important that you had to work this week? I thought you were going on vacation with your husband. I was surprised when Dr. Kroll said you postponed your plans." I felt pale and wobbly, and he rushed to my side, worried I might faint. He later told me there was an unsettling look in my eyes that scared him. "So, Dr. Kroll made these changes?" "Amanda, please, we're almost done here. Let it go. Soon he will just be a bad memory." I smiled, which made him more uneasy when I replied in Maasai. "What did you say?" "I said you were right. He will soon be just a bad memory. Excuse me now, I need to check in." David, Sally, and the other nurses watched her leave. "What do you think she's going to do?" David looked at the nurse. "Nothing, I hope." I paused just outside the office door, steadying myself, checking if my tablet was recording, making sure my lab jacket wasn't covering the lens. Then I opened the door with determination. You! How could you do this? There wasn't an emergency, was there? David is downstairs taking his girlfriend to lunch. He said you told him I wanted to work this week. Why do you think you can mess with people's lives like this? His smile vanished. Knowing the door was open and anyone could hear, he closed it and leaned against it, blocking me. I did it because I could. You think your strong husband protects you. He has no power. I have it. I can make it hard for you to find a good job, so think very carefully about what you say next. I sighed and slumped down. All right. What do you want? What do I have to do to be with my husband? You can start by showing a little gratitude. Why don't you take off your top? Let's see if it looks as good without a bra. That's it? A little show and then I'm free to go? Not by a long shot. You need to learn respect. I think a more personal favor would help. Now why don't you come closer? So, a small favor and it's over, right? He laughed. No. After that, we're going to spend some time together. Who knows, after that, you may not be in such a hurry to get back to your husband. Now come here. I paused, feeling overwhelmed but resolute. I knelt down and when I got close enough, clenched my fist and hit him firmly in the lower stomach. He let out a high-pitched cry as he fell over. Standing up, I kicked him a few times, one aimed low and the others landing near his face, feeling a crack on the second kick. You arrogant fool! You can say goodbye to your medical career once people see the video I recorded. That is, if you aren't practicing from behind bars. I delivered one more kick, then hurried out of the room, tears streaming down my face. Meanwhile, the hospital administrator was having a rough day. Revenue and donations were down, and patient complaints were rising. His position felt insecure, and he knew he had to turn things around soon. When his computer chimed, he almost ignored it until he noticed the subject line. Lawsuit. He opened the email, watching a video clip from Dr. Kroll's office, his mood sinking with each second. At the end of the clip, there was a brief message. I'm taking 2 weeks off on my doctor's advice to recover and avoid further conflict. You have until I return to handle this situation. I'm pressing charges against the doctor for misconduct and intimidation. Ensure he doesn't leave or return to his home country, or I'll be forced to take this further with the hospital. Don't contact me. I'll be out of reach until I return. Amanda Abbasi McLaugh. The administrator played the recording twice more before arranging an emergency board meeting and notifying the authorities. Meanwhile, Dr. Kroll lay on the floor of his office, wincing at the pain and running his tongue over his broken teeth, his anger boiling. He cursed Amanda under his breath. He figured he would have moved on if she'd only done what he expected. As for her husband, he'd held a grudge ever since the man had embarrassed him at the bar. He'd make sure Amanda would never get her certification. Then, with a sudden realization, he remembered. She had recorded the encounter. He panicked, knowing he had to prevent it from becoming public. If that footage surfaced, it could expose other incidents from his past, which he'd managed to keep quiet. He knew he had to leave not just the hospital but the country. If he could get back home, his connections would shield him. With effort, he stood and staggered down the hall toward the elevators by the nurses' station. The nurses looked at him in shock, noticing the blood on his face and coat, asking if he needed help. He grunted a reply, stepping into the elevator and closing the door. Kroll got home and changed his clothes. He took a strong pain reliever to ease his discomfort. He managed to visit his dentist and told him he had been robbed and needed urgent care. He didn't mention that the person who robbed him was a young woman he had been trying to persuade. He sat in the dentist's chair for 3 hours while they fixed what they could and removed 2 teeth that couldn't be saved. After that, he went to his apartment for the last time. He packed everything he valued into 2 suitcases. Instead of making reservations, he went straight to the airport to book a one-way trip home. He had to wait a long time for them to arrange his flight, which required him to change planes twice. He felt relieved when he got his flight confirmations and headed to the correct terminal. 2 men stood behind him, looking very official. Dr. Kroll? I'm Detective James Madison from the Raleigh Police, and this is Sam Tennyson from the State Bureau of Investigation. We need to talk to you at the station, one of them said. Kroll glanced at his watch and replied, his voice unclear from the medication and dental work. I'm sorry, gentlemen, but they just called my flight. Can we meet another time when I return? Agent Tennyson grabbed his wrist firmly. This can't wait, Doctor. You will need to change your flight to a later time. Please come with us. If you resist, we'll have to take you through the airport in handcuffs. It's your choice. Kroll sighed and walked with the officers for a short time before he suddenly ran. With the pain medication slowing him down, he barely got 20 steps before the detective caught him from behind. He was handcuffed and led out of the airport. I unexpectedly came across Amy and Dwayne while they were very close to each other, locked in an embrace. I didn't say anything. I simply reacted. Amy flew back from the force of my pull and hit the floor, sliding against the wall. Dwayne turned around, and if he was upset before, he was furious when I started giving him a good beating. Suddenly, Amy jumped on my back, yelling, "Stop! Please stop! You're hurting him!" I let Dwayne go then and pulled Amy around to face me. "Are you worried about me or him? It doesn't matter because I'm finished. You should get rid of him. We need to talk and don't even think about saying no, or I'll have a serious word with Dave." She helped him get up and out the door. I watched as he limped down the hallway, leaving a trail on the carpet. Amy quickly moved away from me but stayed in the room. "Ewan, she began, but I interrupted her. "Have you been with him yet? Ewan, please, have you been with him yet?" Amy lowered her head and sniffled. I took her hair and lifted her chin until our eyes met. "Have you been with him yet?" "Yes," Amy nearly cried. "I didn't mean for it to happen, it just did. We have feelings for each other, so please don't judge us." She regained her strength and stood taller, ready for my response. I sighed deeply, feeling true regret. "This will hurt Dave. Do you know how much he loves you? He's so happy the band is done so he can focus on you and the kids. You're risking a good life, Amy. If you go through with this, you might lose your children. A judge wouldn't give custody to someone who travels all the time, especially if the income isn't steady. You could even have to pay child support. Did you think about your kids? Even if they don't hate you, how will you stay connected, calling them from different places at strange times? You'll miss all the important moments, games, dance recitals, first crushes, and first kisses while you chase your dreams. And Dwayne, be careful. If he has pursued one married woman, what's to stop him from going after another in the future? You might end up losing everything for nothing. As for your other partner, what makes you think he'll trust you? You've already betrayed your husband and kids. What if someone higher up gets interested in you? Won't he worry about that? Even if you end up together, it might not work out well for either of you. She slowly sank into the couch, my words hitting her hard. I stood up to leave. "Please, do me a favor, Amy. Don't tell Dave until after the show. Let him have a nice memory of playing on stage with you for the last time. But afterward, within a day, you must tell him your plans. If you don't, I will." I walked toward the door and looked back one last time. "Oh, and Amy, you're no longer my friend or Amanda's. If you need to contact me for work before the week is over, you can. Otherwise, we are finished. I won't be able to look at you without feeling disgust. Goodbye, Amy." The reality of her choices seemed to hit her, and she started to cry, trying to speak as I closed the door. I hurried out of the hospital, called a cab, and rushed to the airport. During the ride, I sent a video to the hospital administrator and the local police. Later, I found the administrator. She had called the police while loudly complaining about how terrible the doctor was. The police arrived looking for both me and Dr. Kroll. Since they couldn't find us, they decided to keep an eye on the airport and sent a photo of the doctor to airport security. A camera quickly recognized him, and the police were there in no time. They were surprised when the doctor tried to resist. They had to handcuff him and take him through the terminal to a waiting car. I heard the commotion and thought they had caught a drunk or a thief. I didn't even look up. I had rushed to the airport in my lab coat and scrubs, only thinking about getting to Ewan. In my panic, I almost forgot my passport. I remembered the colonel telling me that if I ever needed anything, I should call him at any time. Fumbling through my purse, I found his card and dialed. It rang many times before someone finally answered. The colonel demanded to know if I knew what time it was. I couldn't help crying again, and through my tears, I told him who I was and what had happened. "I need my husband, Colonel. Can you help me?" "Stay where you are. Someone will come to get you soon. Make sure he calls me when he arrives." After about an hour, a man in a wrinkled suit stood in front of me saying the colonel sent him. He called the colonel and nodded several times while saying, "Yes, sir." He hung up and smiled at me. "You will have quite the story to tell your grandchildren. Come, let's get some coffee while we wait for our ride." He got most of the story out of me while we waited. His expression grew serious as I spoke. Just then, a shadow fell over the table, and he looked up to see a SAS lieutenant and an American pilot. The SAS officer was stiff while the pilot grinned. "Loosen up, Nigel, we're on a mission." He turned to me. "Don't worry about him, ma'am. Someone important just messed up his vacation. Your taxi is right outside." The taxi turned out to be a military helicopter which took us to Fort Bragg. There, 20 more SAS soldiers were waiting by a plane, their training interrupted. I moved quickly from the helicopter to the plane, and we were airborne towards Britain in no time. I tried to relax in the uncomfortable seat and dozed off while the men talked quietly. I woke up suddenly and listened to the soldiers in front of me. "Who is she? Whoever she is, she must know important people. I heard she is the daughter of a colonel and an earl, trying to get home for a family emergency." The captain said the royal family was involved and instructed that no expense should be spared to bring her home. What the earl told them was to treat me like I was his daughter. By the time the message reached the crew, I truly felt like his daughter to them. He also called his cousins, who kindly offered their support. When they saw I was awake, they gave me hot tea from a thermos. "I'm sorry, but that's all we have on Air Britain, ma'am. Do you need anything else?" "Yes. I need to know how long it will take to get to Firth, Scotland. My husband is performing at a festival there and he goes on at 3. I need to be there." The soldier frowned. "That's quite tight, ma'am. We didn't leave until around 2 in the morning your time, and it will take at least 6 hours to land. It's a military airstrip, so you won't find a usual flight service. You'll need to drive for about 90 minutes to reach a bigger city, then you'll have to arrange for a car to Firth. I doubt you'll make it on time, but you could catch up later." Tears ran down my face. "No, I have to be there. It's his band's last show. Plus, I just received amazing news that I need to tell my husband. We're going to have a baby, our first. I hope it's a boy. If it is, whether he likes it or not, he'll be named after his father, Ewan McLaugh Jr. That sounds nice, doesn't it?" The soldier had almost stopped listening until he heard the name. "Is your husband Scottish?" "No, he's American, but he served in your country for nearly 4 years. Does your husband have a nickname?" "Not really. The papers called him the Mad Yank for some of the things he did. Does that count?" He nearly stumbled, so excited he was, standing up quickly and going to talk to an officer. The officer returned to me soon. "Ma'am, can you describe your husband, or better yet, do you have a picture?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my gallery. The captain smiled widely when I was finished. He showed me a tattoo that matched Ewan's. "It's a small world, Mrs. McLaugh. I served with your husband. He is indeed a mad Yank, but a good man, someone you can count on. Now tell me your story." I shared our journey together from the day we met until now. The captain nodded, asked a few questions, and then went ahead to use the radio. I dozed off again, feeling emotionally drained, waking only when the plane landed. I looked out at the lush green ground below. The captain helped me unbuckle with a smile and guided me to a large helicopter. "Here's your ride, Lady McLaugh. We will make sure you reach your husband on time." He turned to the men behind him. "Let's get ready, everyone. We have something to deliver." They packed their things quickly. I took that moment to call Molly. She was thrilled to hear from me. "Amanda, I really wished you could have come. Your husband has been missing you a lot." "Well, he might see me sooner than he thinks. I need a favor." I had to pull the phone away from my ear when Molly squealed with excitement. "I'm on it. See you soon." I noticed that Molly and Rob were smiling while Tony and Mike tried to hide their grins. Later, I found out that Amy didn't know anything about it. "What's going on with you guys?" Molly smiled widely and hugged me. "Nothing much. We're in Scotland, getting ready to play for 67,000 people. Why wouldn't we be happy?" I figured they would share the news when they were ready. I guessed it related to the show. Molly arranged one more practice because a Scottish drummer would join us for a few songs to help Robbie shine. We played until we felt good about it. I tried to call Amanda before we went on stage, but was disappointed when it went to voicemail. I told her I loved her and couldn't wait to come home, then stepped out for our final performance. I looked at her phone and smiled, knowing he would see me soon. The big helicopter landed on the castle grounds, and the colonel, his wife, and a young woman who was a captain came to greet us. "All right," she said as she led me inside. "Let's see if I have everything in order." I had wondered why they were discussing my clothing sizes on the radio. I found out when I entered one of the bedrooms. The captain was adjusting my lab coat. "Okay, you have just enough time for a quick shower, then into your clothes, and we'll take you to your husband. Let's hurry." I rushed through my shower, and then the captain helped me with my makeup, saying I needed to look my best when Ewan saw me. I felt shy about the clothing, but the captain smiled. "He'll want to see you right away, so let's make it nice." The clothes were traditional Scottish outfits in the McLaugh colors. They even placed a tam on my head at just the right angle, holding it in place with bobby pins. The soldiers whistled when I returned to the helicopter. The colonel, in his fine uniform, and his wife, dressed beautifully, were already inside. We took off to the concert, the helicopter circling the arena, and I was amazed by the crowd below. I spotted the stage and knew he was up there. Tears filled my eyes, and the captain and Millicent went to work trying to keep me calm. This was it, the last time we would ever be together on stage. I looked at everyone's faces, trying to remember this moment forever. Everyone was smiling, even Amy, although she looked down and wouldn't meet my gaze. We heard our names called and took our places. We began with the song that inspired our name, Robbie next to me as we sang. The crowd seemed to enjoy it, and we played through our set, performing the songs that meant the most to us. Before long, we were nearing the end. Molly stepped forward to thank the audience and announced that for the final song, we would have some special guests. I knew Charlie and another piper were joining us, but I was surprised when the entire pipe and drum corps came out to join us. The band smiled at their presence. The only hiccup happened when a large helicopter flew above, nearly drowning out the music. I figured it was the press. I knew they were filming the concert for British television and that it would eventually be shown on PBS. I held my accordion and began to play the opening notes of The Rhythm of My Heart while speaking to the crowd. "Thank you for sharing this time with us. Most people do not know, but this is the last time we will ever perform together as a group. Many of us are older and are retiring, and the younger ones will carry on our legacy." Before we perform this song, I wanted to share a few thoughts. I have spent a lot of time here in service. America is dear to my heart, but Scotland will always hold a special place in my soul. In Iraq, I stood with brave friends who were loyal to each other and their mission. I returned home with those who were lucky enough to survive. They were good men, and may they rest in peace. I was surprised when a video from long ago taken by a journalist appeared on the screen. It showed me at the tower playing despite the chaos around me. Then it switched to a scene from the attack, where I was carrying a little girl to safety, followed by images of me being honored and presented with medals. The crowd grew quiet. Many were old enough to remember that time. The large screens displayed a photo of Amanda in her wedding dress. "This is my wife, Amanda Abbasi McLaugh. Isn't she lovely?" The crowd cheered in response. "She's a doctor. I often wonder what she sees in an old piper like me, but I cherish her. She should have been here, but her work kept her away. I miss her deeply. We are hoping to start a family soon, and I dream it will happen here in Scotland." The audience applauded and cheered again, then quieted down once more. This song is special to us. It's our hope to sing it to our children as a lullaby. We often include it in our performances, and we thought it would be a fitting way to close our group. Manda, my love, I can't wait to hold you again. Thank you all from every one of us. We began to sing, and Molly gently helped me set down the accordion, allowing me to focus solely on the vocals. The whole pipe and drum band played with us, creating a powerful Scottish sound. I closed my eyes, focusing on the feeling of my words, when the crowd erupted in cheers. When the cheers kept coming, I opened my eyes to see what was happening. At first, it felt like a dream. Manda! It couldn't be. But there she was, being carried across the stage by two strong soldiers, with a whole group marching behind them, led by the colonel in his uniform, Millicent beside him. Amanda was wearing my clan colors, even the hat. She was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen. She was holding up a small sign that I couldn't read until she got closer. When I saw it, I fell to my knees, overwhelmed with emotion. The cameras focused on the sign, and the crowd cheered again. "We're preggers," was written in big letters. She jumped off the soldier's shoulders and rushed to me, kneeling in front of me. I lifted her into a hug, too emotional to say anything as tears streamed down my face. We stayed like that for the rest of the song, holding each other and crying. The music stopped, except for Amy playing the piano, while 67,000 voices sang along to the words on the screen. The whole band gathered around us, holding microphones and singing, joined by their families. Tony had Bernice and both daughters, while Dave had his two, with Janine trying to hide behind him. The soldiers stood at attention, looking confused, until the colonel gave them a command. "Sing, you lot!" The rhythm of my heart beats like a drum. The words "I love you" flow easily from my lips, and I will never leave my happy home where the sky meets the sea. I'll be sailing. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.